minutes later.
Oh, then yeah, we don't have time for this today. All right. I call to order the special closed session of the City of Council Management of Emeryville Services Authority. Let's call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Donahue.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez is absent. Vice Mayor Pats.
Here.
And Mayor Medina.
Here. Any ex parte communications to report? We all received a letter from SEIU, I believe.
Yes, and I had a meeting on Friday with, for item 5.1.1, I had a meeting on Friday with the Emeryville Police Officers Association. No discussion of the substance of negotiations was discussed, but I just wanted to disclose that I had a meeting with them.
Okay. We've got note that Member Martinez will be here at 4:05 and she can join us in closed session. All right, any other ex parte communications? Seeing none, any public comment on closed session items? Seeing none, let's go to closed session. Mr. Gina. There he is. Mr. Gina, would you like to report out of closed session?
Thank you, Mayor. The Emeryville City Council and the Mesa Board met in closed session on the items listed on the closed session agenda. Regarding item 5.1.1, an update was provided and direction was given. Regarding item 5.1.2, an update was provided and direction was given. On item 5.1.3, no action was taken. Thank you.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned at 5:14 p.m. It is 5:14 p.m. I call to order the special meeting of the City of Emeryville on Tuesday, May 21st. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Donahue.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Here.
And Mayor Medina.
Here and freezing. All right. Approval of the final agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any ex parte communications to report? Yes, member.
On the city budget, I had a meeting with local SEIU 10-1.
Anything else? I received an email from local SEIU 1021.
Received the same email, yeah.
Great. All right, action item 6.1, review of the budget.
Madam Mayor, we are here tonight at this special meeting to present the next two-year budget, the 1920, 2021 budget. We have a presentation for you tonight that's broken down into two parts. The first part will be presentations from the departments. We beg your indulgence to give us about 30 minutes. Each department will walk through several slides that they have. For the fire department, Chief Yoder was unable to make it tonight, so we are graced with the presence of Chief Rocha. So thank him for being here. We appreciate that. The administrative group we've combined, so we'll have three department heads walking through those. And then time for questions after that about the department presentations. And when questions are finished on that, we would move then into Ms. Shea giving the budget presentation, which is about 15 or so minutes. So that is what we'd like to do tonight. And our first present, if that's acceptable.
It is.
Thank you. So our first presenter is the police chief. Thanks, Chief Tejada.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members and our audience. Now, let's figure this out.
Just use the arrow.
Thank you.
Keep going. And
There we are. So our initial slide gives you a quick glance at what our staffing is, our authorized staffing, and the proposed budget. Staffing is at 60 and the proposed budget 14.2 million. Our next slide, I want to do a little overview of the accomplishments for the past 2 years of 2017 to 2019. In personnel, we had lots of changes. We had retirements and hires and promotions. And when we have retirements and promotions, it provides opportunity for a lot of movement within the department. And we've had, in the last 2 years, 3 officers successfully hired and passing their training program, 4 police trainees who went on to the police academy, 2 high school interns. We hired 3 dispatchers, a captain, a record specialist, and then we also have completed our canine unit. We have 3 canine positions, 3 officers in those positions assigned to various shifts on patrol. On community outreach, we've put a lot of effort into this in the last 2 years. Our ever-popular Coffee with a Cop is held about once a month when the weather is amenable to that, so haven't had one in the last couple of weeks. We still participate in the Special Olympics doing the torch run, and this year we participated in Tip a Cop. We also have an officer assigned as a liaison to the homeless community and trained in how to do outreach and offer resources. We have held open houses at the police department for the past 2 years, which has been a great success, and many community members coming through. Last year we partnered with Emergency Preparedness, and that was going on at the fire department while we did our open house. We've partnered with Target every year to do Shop with a Cop at the Christmas season, which some of you have participated in. It's a really feel-good program where we take kids who we've identified throughout the year who would benefit from this kind of program, and they go shopping with a cop at on the kindness of Target. For Christmas presents for themselves and their family members. We've enhanced our social media by creating an internal group focused on disseminating information via social media through Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We also have a presence on Nextdoor. Last year we began monthly events called Breakfast with a Badge, which takes us to Watermark by the Bay once a month to have breakfast with the elderly residents, and it's a very popular event with our officers. We've also done Day on the Bay, Harvest Festival, and all the other community events. We do numerous safety presentations focused on employee safety and active shooter training, so we've done several of those, probably about 8 to 10 in the last 2 years. Internally, we've focused on training in areas of mandated training and professional development. We've implemented the force options training, which also some of you have experienced, and I think appreciated that opportunity to look at what the officers are faced through their experience as much as we can create that with force options. We created and finalized a training plan for all of our department positions, which serves as a professional path for them in their roles. We created a training guide for our supervisors. This is to make sure that we are serving our people in their desired professional paths. We have trained. Our folks have gone into ECCL, Leapfrog, Pixar, Griffles, Pete's, and other locations to do active shooter training, which we benefit from and their security people also benefit from. It's a joint effort. All of our officers to date have been through crisis intervention training. Every single one of them have had that 40-hour training. And we've also focused on wellness and resiliency within the organization for our personnel, as well as focusing on having a resilient organization. We have met or exceeded all of our post-training mandates. Our policy manual is finally up to date, and we have implemented an online training program called Daily Training Bulletins that pushes out a daily training each day on our policy manual. It ensures that our people are aware of policies. It's an ongoing, every day they get an update that they have to read and answer questions on. So moving on to performance measures, which probably is what people are very interested in. Our calls for service, as you can see, have remained somewhat consistent over the past 3 years. We have some increases in violent crime. the percentages make it look worse than it is. We've had 14 in 2017 compared to 13 the previous year, so that's a 5% increase, and it went up a little bit more in 2018. Property crime is down overall by 15% in 2018 compared to previous year. While we are very busy attending to persons with mental health issues, it's remaining somewhat consistent. It's hasn't grown drastically over the last 3 years. And then the biggest decrease is in petty theft. In 2018, down 39% from 2017. Robbery is up. Again, the percentages make it look very significant. Any increase is significant and a cause for concern, but it's up 17%. So what are we doing with all of that? We are consistently pushing out our patrol into what we have developed as a directed patrol program. We look at where trends of crime are occurring, and we push out our patrols with a 2-week assignment to target those areas consistently. And we know that that has an effect to suppress crime. What else do I have here? We are partnering with the security companies that have a presence in our community, meeting with them individually to discuss ways that they can collaborate with us and provide their own security and crime suppression measures using their resources, which complements what we're doing. Then in our goals for personnel and training, we want to continue, well, one page ahead of myself here. Continue to recruit and hire the best of the best. We're very disciplined in our hiring and background process, and we feel that we do an outstanding job. As you know, when you meet our people, they are the cream of the crop. They really are passionate about public service, and they know how to do their job and do it well. And we have a lot of support from our community because they see that in action. We're going to implement our new body-worn camera system. The ones that we have are outdated and parts are no longer available. We're also going to replace the computers in the cars. Those ones are out of date also. We're also looking at a product called IA Pro, which would meet the needs of our professional staff and our internal affairs efforts. It's a one-stop shop. It will keep everything in one place. It's easy to manage, easy to find any records that fall into the category of IA or citizen complaints. We're also looking at text to 911 system, which will make contacting us easier for people who prefer to text. And then the Blue Team implementation is a software that allows officers and sergeants to enter information on incidents from the street. Incidents such as use of force, traffic accidents, even complaints can be put in on the street. It's a one-stop shop. It allows us to have one storage location for all of these reports, and also allows for data consistency. We are also hopeful to finish the acquisition of online reporting. Again, another way to make it as convenient as possible for people to reach out to us and report crime. And then the final thing under technology is establishing a radio protocol work group. Some department highlights from the last 2 years. In April of last year, we held a team building. It was one 2-day event and one 1-day event for those who couldn't make it to the 2-day event. So we touched pretty much everybody in the department, had an opportunity to provide input on the status of the organization and chart a strategic plan for the future. We also created an employee awards and recognition program. We have staff that does outstanding work, and it's important to recognize that. So now we have an annual department meeting where we recognize the good work of our staff for various categories. We also have a focus on employee wellness, which is incredibly important given the stress and the trauma that our first responders experience in this profession. We have several different kinds of opportunities available to our staff, from mindfulness meditation, yoga, resiliency training, compassion cultivation, all of the things that address the human behind the badge and keeping that person whole and healthy so that when they go out on the street, they are whole and healthy and able to respond to incidents. We will continue to seek grant funding. In 2017, we applied for $300,000 in grants and received just under $200,000. And in 2019, thus far, we've applied for $200,000 and received just under $100,000 in grant funding. We'll continue with our crisis intervention and de-escalation training. And I think it's important to note that we have not had any sustained complaints of excessive force in the last 2 years. We've not had any officers seriously injured in their course of duty. We have no force that resulted in serious injury to a person being taken into custody. And this includes all those incidents where we have encountered people with weapons, from knives to guns. So that's really an important statistic for us. And then to date, we have fully complied with SB 1421. We will continue with our cultural competency, procedural justice, and race relations training. And we did receive from Post a grant for $69,000 to further that training. So that concludes my presentation. I would like to thank my staff. I'm very proud to serve as the chief of the Emeryville Police Department. We have outstanding staff. They do amazing things every day. I'd like to thank the council for your support. My peers, department heads, we work collaboratively. It's a great team to be on, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next up is Chief Rocha.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and I truly am the stand-in tonight. Chief Yoder really wanted to be here to the point where he didn't want me here, and then unfortunately, which made me wonder a little bit, but unfortunately he was physically sick today, so couldn't make it. So the Alameda County Fire Department budget that is before you shows $9.18 million. The fire department's actual under professional services. The fire department's budget's really about $7.5 million. The city has a few other items that are included in our budget. Unfunded pension that's, I believe, tied to your previous pension plan with your previous firefighters, and then vehicle replacement funds and other city operations that are included within the fund. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. We're fortunate to be in a 3-year contract with the city. I think this next year we'll be doing a full review of that contract for the renewal. Up on the screen you have the responses or totals that we have. Year to date, about 803 responses here within the city. We've done a lot more to increase, I think, our CERT training program and our Emergency Operations Center training program that we offer to the city. And then we're, of course, always trying to meet our standards that we have or exceed those standards that we have for the firefighters themselves. At the bottom, and a little bit kind of glared out at the bottom, shows the inspection summaries for plan checks and things. And I was at the Fire Commission talked about that when you compare to some of the other cities that we have. Emeryville is certainly, for a city slightly larger than 1 square mile, certainly is a busy place for our fire prevention staff with the work that they have to do. Our responses, of course, are always to meet the calls of service that we have with the staffing that we have here in the city and the response time standards that we have developed in our responses. Mutual aid responses, while not a direct impact, I think, to the city, is an important thing for us to participate in statewide. It's kind of like depositing money into a piggy bank. At some point in the future, we will need assistance, so we provide assistance to others. I will say that it's in the media recently in terms of what's going on federally with mutual aid. The Alameda County Fire Department carries the burden of mutual aid, and then we are reimbursed by the state or the federal government into the fire district portion. We don't share that with the cities, so we're not shifting money in terms of we're not collecting money from the cities and then paying you back when we get reimbursed from it. It's just easier to carry it in the district. Before we respond, I'm the Region 2 coordinator. for fire and rescue mutual aid here in California, so in Region 2. So I know whether it's a state incident or it's a federal incident before we actually respond. So we've got about $100,000 out today. That is federal mutual aid that they owe us from last year. That is what's being talked about. It's not that much. That's for a bulldozer responding somewhere. But we expect to be reimbursed as we move forward. And in all honesty, the California Fire Assistance Agreement that's being discussed in the media today is a contractual agreement that the federal government has to live up to with the state of California. And while it's become a very political discussion, I think is going to be settled at the end of the day, probably in the courts. So training and exercises, of course, we seek to prepare the community and our folks for their responses and stay in compliance with all of the mandates that we have for training, and in fact we exceed those in most cases with our personnel and the curriculum that we put out there for folks. We're also, a couple other things that we're working on that are really important is the smooth ambulance transition. As Paramedic Plus leaves the system at the end of June, and July 1, Falk Ambulance comes into the system. We are the dispatch center for Falk. We're the dispatch center for Paramedics Plus today, and we'll be the dispatch center for Falk as they come into the system. So that's something that's very important for us to make sure that that transition is smooth and that we're able to dispatch their ambulance appropriately. And then part of that transition is a new records management system that's being brought on within the county that we will have the ability to be mobile when we're doing our reports, or the firefighters are doing their reports on a tough book in the field, and that will transfer to the ambulance that will then transfer to the emergency department once they arrive on scene. This is actually the FDEs for the overall Alameda County Fire Department. So well, I think you're getting a good value for that $7.5 million. It's not the 475 FTEs that's shown up on the screen. Your FTEs are 20. There are 3 shifts with 6 firefighters, a captain, engineer, and a firefighter at each station. Then you have a deputy fire marshal and a code compliance officer in your system. But there are a lot of value-added things that the department brings by the economies of scale that we're able to offer in terms of services that we provide, not only through the dispatch center, but through our hazardous materials team being a Type 1 team, which is the highest rating in the state, our heavy rescue being a Type 1 team as well, and then the urban search and rescue and water rescue programs that we bring to the city. I think that's it. Any questions?
Thanks, Chief. I think we'll take questions after all the department presentations.
Thank you.
Public Works is next.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm Andrew Clow, your Public Works Director, and we'll go a few minutes here and talk about Public Works. We have 21 and a half FTEs, so I try to visualize that. Our expense budget's around $8 million, and our capital budget at around $14 million. Some of the accomplishments over the last couple of years, we're in full compliance with our sanitary sewer consent decree. We placed 11 bike share stations around the city. We've reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 16% since 2010. Our waste diversion rate of 83% is the highest in Alameda County. The Emeryville Greenway, another section of that, otherwise known as Pelledew Park, the construction was completed and opened. We did a streetlight retrofit project which significantly decreased the amount of energy to power our streetlights and will pay for itself over a number of years, 5 to 6. Traffic signal video detection improvements throughout the city, and we'll be continuing to improve the traffic signals, place some new ones, and allow much better synchronization, timing, and also bicycle detection. Temescal Creek Park lighting improvements, and worked with the public market and the private developers down there at the expansions of Christie Avenue Park, and that's what that photograph there is the whale, the very popular whale at the park. Some of the goals for Public Works moving forward on our project priorities is we're going to build a bridge, we're going to repair an eroding shoreline, we're going to rehabilitate our child development center, and we're going to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety. Those would be our major project priorities. But that's what happens on the capital side, trying to maintain the infrastructure, build new infrastructure, and then it's what happens every day. And we also need to improve the active management of our city assets. And to do that, we're going to complete a facilities condition assessment. We're going to take a look at the urban forest and develop an urban forest maintenance management plan. And we'll also be implementing a computerized maintenance management system to help us use data to improve our operations, the efficiency of it, and be able to report out on it much better. A couple of highlights is our annual street rehabilitation program, which we completed last summer's, I should say, version. We touched 30% of the streets in the city of Emeryville. The photo on the left there is the slurry seal down Park, and then you see a painted bike box. We did a lot of improvements like that through the city, trying to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety as part of our paving program. This summer when we do it, we're also going to be focused a lot more on some of the curb returns and some of the curb ramps and trying to improve some of the pedestrian access on and off the street as it crosses. The real highlight in Public Works, though, is our staff. Without our staff, we don't get anything done. And it's really always been one of the reasons why I like working for Public Works. One of the great things is we do make a difference every day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Next up is community development.
Hi there, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. As you know, I'm Charlie Bryant, your Community Development Director. In community development, we have 18 and a half full-time equivalent employees. Our proposed budget for fiscal year 1920 is about $6.9 million. About $4.3 million of that is the general fund, and the other $2.5 million is from the other 9 funds that the Community Development Department administers. As you know, the Community Development Department consists of 3 divisions: planning, building, and economic development and housing. Planning does current planning and long-range planning. The building division, of course, issues building permits, which involves plan checking, inspection, and certificates of occupancy when the buildings are completed, as well as a number of administrative tasks related to all of that. Economic development and housing covers a wide range of duties, including economic development, of course, the affordable housing program, public art, capital program planning, grants management, and brownfield remediation. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the major accomplishments of these 3 divisions within the last 2 years, and then the goals of the 3 divisions for the next 2 years. This is very high level, just hitting the highlights of these 3 divisions. There's a lot more detail in the budget document. So in the planning division, the 40th and San Pablo Bus Hub concept plan is currently being finalized. There's a community meeting about that tomorrow night, and then a study session at the Planning Commission the night after that, and we hope to bring that back to the council for adoption probably late summer, early fall, after it goes through a few more committees. The Sherwin-Williams project, the building and open space portions of it received their planning entitlements during the last couple of years, and now it is in for building permit plan check, and the planning division, of course, is looking at those plans as well. The Ani Christie mixed use project is just getting underway. The application was submitted in January. We are starting to work on the EIR for that, which we plan to publish this fall. And the planning division also administratively approved approximately 100 minor, so-called minor permits, minor use permits, minor design review, minor signs, and so forth. The building division issued about 1,400 permits based on a total construction valuation of about $224 million over the last 2 years. The blighted Nady property at 6701 Showmont Street was abated. We amended the municipal code to provide for expedited permitting for electric vehicle charging stations, and we also issued 6 so-called BORP permits, building occupancy resumption permits. That is so that private property owners can inspect their own buildings after an earthquake, so that city resources can be devoted to other things. In the Economic Development and Housing Division, a lot of things in the last couple of years. Again, just the highlights. The economic development strategy was updated. We initiated the Small Business Support BizNexus meetups and a number of other things to support small businesses. The Estrella Vista Affordable Housing Project at 3706 San Pablo is just about completed. Of course, we continued implementing the Affordable Housing Program. We enhanced the homeless services, continued to enforce the labor standards, minimum wage, fair work week, Measure C, the old Measure C, the hotel measures. The public art program, including murals, bus shelter art, the annual purchase award, and marina art, of course, were all carried out. As Andrew mentioned, Pellado Park was completed. That started as an economic development and housing project, and that was completed. The paid parking strategy was adopted, as you know. A developer was selected for the Emeryville Center of the Arts. The state designated Emeryville as a cultural district called Rotten City Emeryville, and we facilitated the selection of 2 cannabis retail dispensaries. Moving on to the next 2 fiscal years, in the planning division, we hope to finalize the 40th and San Pablo Bus Hub plan and then start seeking grant funding so that we can design it and build it. We're going to initiate an update of the PED bike plan, begin planning for sea level rise, including possibly a living levee and a trail along, that's a tongue twister, trail along the Emeryville Crescent from Powell Street out to the Bay Bridge. We're going to complete the processing of the Ani Christie mixed-use project, and we'll see where that leads to, and continue to efficiently process administrative planning permits. In the building division, as you may know, the building code, the state building code is on a 3-year cycle. It gets updated every 3 years. The next update is coming right up. It's due to take effect on January 1st, 2020. And that involves local amendments to the state building code. So we will be working on that code adoption in the next coming months so that you can adopt it before January 1st. We hope to develop a soft story ordinance to seismically retrofit wood frame buildings. We'll, of course, continue to facilitate permitting, construction, and completion of development projects and continue to investigate and abate code violations. And in economic development and housing, we'll continue to implement the economic development strategy, complete the Art Center project, issue RFPs, hopefully, for the Christie Avenue properties and Site B, continue to implement the labor standards, develop an expenditure plan for the housing bond, Measure C housing bond, that Measure C, and continue implementation of the homeless strategy. We hope to develop senior and or intergenerational housing project at 4300 San Pablo Avenue, the old rec center site, implement the paid parking in the North Hollis and Triangle neighborhoods, continue working with the Alameda County Transportation Commission on the San Pablo Avenue corridor plan, and continue to implement the public art master plan, annual purchase award, and all of the other public art projects. A few highlights here, just a few pretty pictures of some of the things that I just talked about. This, of course, is the Sherwin-Williams project, which is now in for plan check. This is the mural that was installed along Pellado Park. This is the interpretive signage that just recently went up. This is a rather dated, I understand, rendering of the Art Center, but it looks nice. And this is the 40th and San Pablo bus hub project. This is just the portion between Adeline and San Pablo. Of course, it extends all the way to the bridge, but this illustrates what will happen in that area. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Charlie. Mr. Jimenez is next with Community Services.
Good evening, Mayor and Council Member. Pedro Jimenez, Community Services Director. We have about
More than Charlie.
we have about 60 FTEs. That's about 120 part-time employees and about 32 full-time employees. Our budget's $6 million. So some of our accomplishments in our department include that this is our 3rd year at ECCL. Revenue from third-party rentals has grown from $160,000 in the first full year to $300,000 projected for the end of this budget year. We've created some aquatic programming and expanded. Was originally supposed to be a seasonal pool, now is a year-round pool where we offer lessons. Currently, we're doing right now about 160 lessons monthly. Lap swim rentals with the master swim team, other local swim teams. We're also even creating our own rec swim team, which eventually will go into a USA swim team. Special events we've been holding here in the community, create an opportunity for the community to gather and create community. We've had movie nights that have had 200 in attendance, Harvest Festival that had about 1,000, tree lighting almost 1,000 also, and the Expo Spring Festival Egg Hunt, we estimated 2,000 people coming out. We have secured a grant for the Senior Center for the next 5 years through the Alameda County Area Agency for the senior programming. We currently serve about 100 seniors daily. There's a membership of 1,900, and we offer about 240 program hours at the Senior Center. We've also secured a funding from the Alameda County Transportation for a passenger bus, $132,000, where seniors get to enjoy going to museums, art, music, shopping, dinner. And we've had about 207 people this last month enjoyed excursions at the Senior Center. Community services goals is to provide the best possible child care for the community at ECDC. We currently serve about 75 to 80 students there yearly. We continue to develop and implement new programs for adults, youth, teens, and the community. For example, 8 to Go averages about 160 trips monthly. We serve about 190 meals at the site or with Meals on Wheels in the community. Summer camps average attendance weekly are about 150 to 200. After school programs, 125 to 150 monthly. We are also going to be conducting gathering information for the AARP Network of Friendly Communities project. We've currently done a survey. We're trying to promote policies to make our city friendlier, especially to all ages, but especially the aging population. Some of the highlights, as you see in here, we've created also 5 new divisions in the budget process. This will help us to budget and monitor expenditures and revenues for the department. We already had admin, ECDC, youth and adult, but we added aquatics, special events, youth camps, facilities, adult sports, youth sports and classes to be able to really capture expenditures and revenues for those. We've introduced new programs. We mentioned a basketball program for youth that's been we reached capacity. We had 40 participants. Also, micro soccer has been a popular program that we've had that also had 40 participants. And we also hired our permanent manager and assistant manager for ECDC to provide quality care and comply with community care licensing. So, presentation.
Thanks, Pedro. So now we'll have a bit of a tag team for our administration group. Sherry, are you kicking it off? All right.
Yes, my colleagues are going to join me. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here tonight with my colleagues to tell you a little bit about the administration group, which is comprised of city manager, city attorney, city clerk, finance, human resources, and information technology, small but mighty. And we altogether combined, we are about 22 and a half FTEs, and the proposed budget is about 4.7 million. So it's my honor to talk about the accomplishments of the last 2 years for our group. In the city clerk department, we've made extensive progress on the records management project, which had a lot of progress needed. And we've successfully migrated all of our scanned records out of an obsolete, unsupported system into Laserfish, which is the current sort of gold standard for electronics records management, and it interacts seamlessly with our other products, such as our agenda management. So going forward, we'll bring in all the old records, and then going forward, day forward, we'll we'll import all of those records into this archive, so it'll all be neatly organized and indexed. And our physical records that are held both on-site in various locations and then in off-site storage are in the process of being reviewed. We're about halfway through, and so we can determine which ones have exceeded their retention schedules and can either be moved to off-site storage or in some cases destroyed if they've exceeded their retention requirements. Another accomplishment for the city clerk's office was we recruited and trained a new deputy city clerk to fill a vacancy that we had. And we attracted a fine group of candidates, of which Ty Pham was the successful candidate. And believe it or not, he's been on the job for almost a year now. And because of the team that we have in that front office that we're able to do the work that we've done this year and the accomplishments that we've made, and we've kind of redefined our roles based on aptitudes and interests. For the finance department, as you know, we instituted or established a Section 115 pension trust in 2017. And I had a really cool note I was going to say about that, if I can find it. Ah, yes. That is to mitigate upcoming rate increases. And also, very importantly, the Finance Department implemented a business license tax discovery program wherein they could identify, with the help of consultant Muni Services, they were able to identify unregistered businesses, giving us the ability to not only collect new fees, but to recover late fees. And for example, for the 17-18 fiscal year, that was to the tune of $140,000 that we were able to recover due to that program. In human resources accomplishments for the last couple of years, they transitioned, you'll see a recurring theme of transitioning to newer and better technologies that Mike will talk about, but they transitioned to a new online hiring platform. It's called NeoGov, and they were able to, through that, to process about 1,300 applicants for 21 recruitments. Sorry. And what's important to note about that is that this is accomplished despite there being no budgeted position for recruitment. So we're kind of doing this magic with not a person on the books to do it. Other accomplishments for HR was working in emergency preparedness coordination and different events, then EOC section training, emergency preparedness fair, and a county Yellow Command exercise on mass care and shelter were all facilitated by HR. In information technology, there have been many infrastructure improvements for security, stability, and scalability, including the redesign of the wide area network. And we migrated our phone system to the cloud, and that came with it lots of cool new features that we can use on our desktop phones. We have next generation firewalls, and then they've implemented a full disaster recovery solution so that, as Christine says, if the bad thing happens, we are able to resume business quickly because we have redundancy in our system. So thank you, and now Mike Parenti.
Good evening, I'm Mike Parenti, your IT manager. The Administrative Services Department goals focus on two main areas: training and improving efficiencies of existing processes. City Clerk is currently pursuing the Master Municipal Clerk certification, which is the highest level available through International Institute of Municipal Clerks. I can't read that sentence again. The Deputy Clerk team members are seeking initial Municipal Clerk certification, as well as records management and continuing education, and IT and finance continue their training as well. HR department will be bringing multiple trainings in-house. By leading training themselves, HR will be able to schedule departments more efficiently, as well ensure compliance is met for trainings. Administrative departments will also be looking at internal processes to identify those that are candidates for efficiency improvements, either by changing current methods or by introducing technology to supplement the existing processes. Some examples of those are completing a records management project, implementing electronic timesheets, digitizing the contract routing process, and the procure-to-pay workflow. The goal of these projects is to reduce the amount of time it takes to complete each cycle by cutting out the duplicative or manual tasks and unnecessary paperwork that is currently generated with the current methods. This will also help reduce errors and omissions that can happen with a manual paper-driven process. Other goals that are not listed here are to continue to support the other departments. You've heard a lot of goals tonight, and the administrative departments have a role in many of those projects, whether it be to help implement the technology, work on the contracts, or handle the financials of all those different projects.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Lopez, the HR Director, and I am going to end our presentation on administration by talking about a few highlights. First is human resources. A lot of the last couple years have been spent on building relationships, as you see from some of the highlights from the last 2 years, including continuing our employee engagement events, which include an annual appreciation lunch, and then we also had an employee breakfast, and we also have a holiday party. This could not be done without our amazing employee engagement committee, which is all staff here at the city. We also created the Emeryville Police Joint Labor Management Committee, and with the assistance of Police Chief Tejada and, of course, the board members of POA, we come together once a month to discuss issues and to circumvent going down the grievance boulevard. And of course, employee training, as Mr. Parenti pointed out, is something that we have fulfilled in the past and hope to continue arranging and making available for our staff. In terms of information technology, as you've heard before, they've completed several projects that have improved the security, stability, and scalability of the city's technology infrastructure, including the aforementioned redesign of the network, phone system migration, and implementation of a disaster recovery solution. Additional desktop and server replacement was completed throughout the city. We all got really wonderful new computers, and the back-end software upgrades were all completed, all resulting in a much more robust technology infrastructure. Oh, sorry. I was wondering if I didn't mean to skip the city clerk. So the things that are up here as highlights actually really point out the fact that the city clerk's office has really been working hard to bring our practices here at the city up to date in regards to records management. It has actually been a great process in which we've organized all our files and are moving towards an electronic record-keeping system, and therefore bringing us into this century. It's been a great project, and it's run seamlessly. And again, it's all being done in an effort to bring us all up to date in how we record and store our records. And last but not least, we have our finance department. This is the first time that finance has completed a comprehensive 5-year projection, and this will now be a regular part of the budget process, and every time we do the budget, will help identify challenges and opportunities for the city and make budgeting a lot more thorough process. So, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's the end of our, if you could just click, thank you, Michael. We are happy to take questions now, if you'd like to do that. And then the next presentation, as I mentioned, is the budget.
Any clarifying questions on these department reports? All right, seeing
Move
none.
into the budget.
More budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Susan Shea, Finance Director. First, I'll provide an overview of the proposed budget. The general fund budget is a balanced budget for the 2019-21 budget cycle. This budget focuses on the city's long-term financial health and reflects fiscal strategies to sustain services for the long term. While modest revenue growth is projected throughout the forecast, expenditures are expected to outpace revenues in the long run due to increasing operating costs. As we plan for the city's financial future, we need to be mindful of volatile economic cycles, unfunded pension liabilities, and the city's growing population. This budget offers a balanced approach to these challenges. This slide presents citywide expenditures. General fund expenditures are projected at $45 million for fiscal year 2020 and $46 million for fiscal year 2021. General fund expenditures and expenditures for operating funds are projected to exceed $80 million in each fiscal year. Operating funds include funds such as the sewer fund, reserve funds, and debt service funds. Operating and capital expenditures are projected to exceed $95 million in each fiscal year. Next, let's take a look at the economic outlook. The state's May revised budget indicates that the economic growth in the U.S. and California is expected to slow over the forecast, with continued growth dependent on consumers doing better and spending more. The state budget also acknowledges risks that may impact the economy. The main risks to the outlook remain a stock market correction, federal policy, a global slowdown, or a recession. This chart is copied from the state budget. It presents the projected gross domestic product growth. As you can see from the chart, the GDP growth is expected to slow down in the next 4 years. Next, let's take a look at the local economy and the challenges that the city will face in the next few years. Emeryville's economic outlook remains positive due to low unemployment rate and a growing population. Population is expected to grow significantly in the next few years due to new housing constructions. While there are opportunities ahead of us, the city faces a number of challenges, including slow growth in sales tax due to online purchase, slow growth in utility users tax due to the continued decline in telecommunication revenues, and the installation of solar alternatives and cost reduction in renewable energy, rising pension costs, and rising insurance costs. The budget includes a general fund long-term forecast. The forecast serves as the foundation for the 2019-21 budget. It helps to provide guidance for resource allocations and to plan for the future. This chart presents the general fund revenue and expenditure trends for the next 5 years. Small surpluses are projected for fiscal years 2020 through 2022. The surpluses are related to the new parking management program, and funds need to be set aside to support the program in the long run. Deficits are projected after fiscal year 2022. The deficit for fiscal year 2023 is projected at $900,000 and $1.1 million for fiscal year 2024. The city should continue to maintain fiscal discipline and identify revenue opportunities to sustain services in the long run. This chart presents the general fund revenue sensitivity analysis. If the general fund revenue were to increase by 1% every year in the next 5 years, our projected deficits will be eliminated. On the other hand, if the general fund revenue were to reduce by 1% every year in the next 5 years, we will run into more budget problems. The long-term forecast reflects strategies to build a secure financial future with the goal to balance the 2019-21 budget and to reduce deficits in the long run. The proposed strategies include updating the residual tax increment policy, incorporating salary and benefit savings assumptions into the budget, withdrawing funds from the pension reserve, recovering overhead costs from enterprise fund and special funds, and establishing a financial policy for the parking management program. The first strategy was presented to the City Council on May 7th as part of the CIP presentation. The proposal is to reduce the tax increment allocation to the Capital Projects Fund from 50% to 47.5% in fiscal year 2020 and to 22.5% effective fiscal year 2021. 2.5% allocation will be used to support public art programs, and 25% allocation will be used to support general operations. The reallocation from the Capital Projects Fund to the other two funds is estimated at $6.8 million over a 5-year period. The second strategy is to incorporate an assumption of 1% salary and benefit savings annually into the general fund budget. The estimated annual savings are expected to range from $235,000 to $270,000. The third strategy is to allocate $500,000 from the Section 115 pension reserve to offset the increase in pension costs starting in fiscal year 2022, while continuing to make deposits into the fund as annual budgets allow. Staff proposed to transfer $2.1 million into the pension reserve in fiscal year 2019 if surplus funds are available. This will ensure sufficient funding for pension benefits in future years. The fourth strategy is to recover overhead costs from enterprise and special funds starting in fiscal year 2021 to ensure full cost recovery to the general fund. The city currently only recovers direct costs from these funds. The estimated annual recovery from those funds is expected to range from $215,000 to $230,000. The last strategy is to establish a financial policy for the newly created parking management program. Revenues generated by the parking management program should be used to cover salaries and benefits, overhead costs, and other operating and capital-related expenditures. When there are surpluses, funds should be set aside to support the program in future years. As we all know, when there are new programs, there are always uncertainties about revenue streams. This policy will ensure sufficient funding for this program in the long run. This slide presents the budget proposals by fund. Proposed changes are to ensure service delivery and operational efficiency. The general fund proposals total $471,000 for fiscal year 2020 and $496,000 for fiscal year 2021. A significant portion of the budget is related to the parking management program. The budget proposed to add a parking manager and 1.5 police services technician positions to support the parking management program. Related operating and capital expenditures are also included in the budget. Expenditures will be covered by parking revenues. For human resource services, the budget proposed to add a half-time HR tech to support recruitment and other HR functions. There's no cost impact for this proposal because other operating expenditures are reduced to offset the increase. For the housing program, the budget proposed to add a community and economic development coordinator position for the housing bond program that was approved by the voters in June 2018. The position will be supported by funds from the Affordable Housing Fund in the first 2 years. For the capital improvement program, the budget proposed to freeze a vacant admin analyst position and budget temporary personnel services to support the South Bayfront Bridge project and other capital improvement projects. Costs will be supported by funds from the Capital Projects Fund. This slide presents the general fund revenue trends. Revenue projections reflect conservative, sustainable revenues to sustain services in the long run. Revenues are expected to grow from $45 million in fiscal year 2020 to $49 million in fiscal year 2024. Revenues below the blue line represent the city's major revenue source, including hotel tax, business tax, and sales tax. They comprise almost 60% of the general fund revenue. These revenues are sensitive to economic cycles. If one or two large businesses pull out of the city, there will be significant budget impacts to the city. This slide presents the general fund expenditure projections. Expenditures are expected to increase from $45 million in fiscal year 2020 to $51 million in fiscal year 2024. Our key cost drivers are salaries and benefits. They represent more than 50% of the general fund budget. The pie chart presents the general fund expenditures by program for fiscal year 2020. Police and fire expenditures comprise more than 50% of the budget. 9% for public works, 10% for community development, 8% for community services, 10% for administration, and 12% for non-departmental operations. This slide presents the projected general fund reserves. The economic uncertainty reserve is projected at $22.4 million. It's about 50% of the proposed 2020 budget. The pension reserve set aside by the City Council is expected to remain at 10.7 million. The city holds a reserve in the disaster fund. The council goal is 5 million. We have a gap of 1.6 million. The proposed budget and the 5-year capital improvement program were presented to the Budget and Governance and Budget Advisory Committees last week. The committees also discussed the proposed budget balancing strategies. There were no recommended changes from the committees. This concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Clarifying questions on this presentation? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up now for public comment on either these items or any items, since we didn't do non-agenda public comment earlier. Any public comment whatsoever? Come on up.
Good evening, Mayor Medina, council members. I'm Miru Desai. I'm speaking here as the SEIU Emeryville chapter president. I'm here. I trust that you all have received our letter that was emailed yesterday. And I'm basically going to summarize what that letter says. First of all, I would like to thank staff for making this budget process thus far painless and very smooth. We also appreciated a couple of the cost savings, revenue generating strategies, which are basically a low-hanging fruit, which could have been picked up any time, but were picked up this time, and we do appreciate that. The other comment and an ask and a request that SCIU would like to make at this time is to reconsider one line item that reclassifies IT manager to IT director at this time, and consider it once all the 3 union contract negotiations have been completed, and consider this line item at that time in conjunction with those. The reason is that this reclassification results in an increase in cost without any increase in capacity or any increase in responsibilities in that position. And our concern is mainly that we are under negotiations. In fact, all 3 unions are under negotiations at this time. And for us, I can only speak for SEIU, we have yet to receive a single response from management on our proposals. So under such conditions, any reclassification that does not result in increased capacity or increased responsibilities in that position is something that SEIU cannot support. And it's not the reclassification itself, it is the timing of it. We would ask that you consider this item after the union contracts, all 3 union contracts have been sealed. Thank you for your time.
Bill Reuter, Chair of the Budget Advisory Committee for the city. Just a quick comment. I've been serving on the Finance Committee that preceded it and the present Budget Advisory Committee. I think I'm in my 8th year at the business. Let me just say that the present budget presented to you is one of the clearest and most straightforward in terms of its presentation quality that I've seen. The charts are good. Members of my committee have contributed to the quality of those charts, and I'm pleased by that. Our present status is sound. The budget is sound. The problems ahead are clear, and I think you folks all know what they are, the challenges ahead. And it's a good piece of work, and I compliment the city staff on a fine budget presentation for this year.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Seeing none, I think we can move to discussion. There were some questions in the staff report. Do we want to pop those up, or? Yep. Did you have a screen with any discussion questions for us?
Actually, this is the last slide. Yeah.
We don't have any specific pointed questions, really. The policy proposals that Ms. Shea went through and that are outlined in the staff report, we'd certainly like the council to give us any questions or concerns. If you don't have any, those would be baked into, essentially built into the budget that we would be bringing forward for your consideration for adoption on June 4th.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from, yes, our budget.
It's actually not a question on the budget. This has to do with one of the department head reports. We have this ambulance provider changeover happening in July, and I'm just wondering if we will get a report on when that happens. If we will have an opportunity to hear about that process and how it's going. So for those who might have missed it, we're going from Paramedics Plus to Falk, and that's happening July 1st.
Right.
And so that's a big change for the county, and I just am wondering if the council is going to have an opportunity to hear how that's going.
Chief?
Yeah, I'd certainly be willing to come back to the council at a meeting and discuss how that's going. So the Alameda County Fire Department, as I mentioned, will be the dispatch center for Falk Ambulance. We're currently for Paramedics Plus. So we are working through all of the things that need to transition to make that happen. There are a significant number of decisions that Falk Ambulance needs to make at certain time points to make that all transpire. But at this point, everything appears to be on schedule as we move forward with it.
And is there anything that community members should know about this changeover that will affect their level of service?
So I think the major change in the levels of service is that the county MS is part of the RFP that they put out, changed some of the medical priority dispatch so that there are 4 categories now instead of the multiple categories that existed. There will be both advanced life support ambulances, which exist today across the board throughout the county, and basic life support ambulances. The basic life support ambulances will change the responses in some cases, and we'll be watching that very closely, because if a basic life support ambulance responds to a call and that call is upgraded to advanced life support, our concern is that the firefighter paramedic would then be placed on the ambulance and need to respond to the hospital.
And just to kind of clarify that comment, that would mean that one of our engines would be out of service for that time if our paramedic had to jump on that ambulance.
That would be the case. We believe, based on the data that the county EMS has done over the course of a few years of analysis, that's going to be a very rare instance, but we're going to watch that very closely.
And then one more question. So this new priority system that we're using, is this an established system that we've seen in use in other communities successfully? Because that is different for our dispatch.
So we have used the medical priority dispatch already. What the county medical director has done is shifted around a certain number of calls. Today, the system is Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Echo, Delta, and Omega. And what they've done is they've moved it into 4 different categories now, with the Alphas, the Bravos, and some Charlies being in what's called Priority 4, and those will get basic life support ambulances.
Okay.
With a 20-minute response time.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from you from a budget committee perspective?
From a budget committee perspective, I want to thank staff and all of the department heads and all of the departments, and very much our city manager for making this a transparent, clear process that I think made a lot of sense. I want to appreciate the way the process was laid out, the timeliness in which it happened, and the legibility of the staff reports.
Member Bowders?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I don't have much to add. I would echo what Councilmember Martinez said. I want to thank the staff and the city manager. I also really want to thank Councilmember Martinez, who's been my partner in crime on budget over the last 2 years here. And I want to thank all the employees of the city of Emeryville. As was alluded to, it was a bumpy ride in 2017, and this was a very smooth process. And so I think where we're at is a really great thing. I was happy to see that waste diversion rate was at 83%. I know that's about half of that's due to Councilmember Martinez. So I want to give her props for that. And then I just want to address which is amazing, the only item that I heard as a concern, and I just want to reflect back. I agree with the representative from SEIU about the fact that this was a much more clean and transparent process, and we found low-hanging fruit, as you noted. There were things that the city is not doing. We've identified ways to ensure staffing levels are adequately funded through enterprise funds, other things that we've discussed at committee over the past few months. And to the concern about the IT position, I believe in reviewing this in detail that the IT personnel that's referenced in your letter were already functioning, actually, rather than we're reclassifying somebody at a different level for work they already do. I believe they were doing the work of a department head. And so upon reviewing this, I actually think that the city manager's recommendation here, like the other recommendations to make better use of funds, is to actually classify that personnel properly. But I took your letter to heart, and I've had that inquiry, and I'm satisfied that we're doing the right thing. So I appreciate the inquiry, but I'm supportive of that recommendation.
Member Donahue.
Well, I'm pleased that it seems like we've really had a thoughtful approach about our maintenance, capital depreciation of our basic parts of our city in this budget. Of course, the future looks a little difficult. We're going to have to strategize what we're going to do going forward. So I think that's the message I'm getting, and we need to do that.
Vice Mayor Pats?
I want to echo some of the things said by earlier council members. I'm thinking back to what this process was like 2 years ago, and poultry farming comes to mind. This is much better and much cleaner, much more transparent. I think it starts with the city manager making this a priority. I think it goes very much through the budget advisory committee process, and it falls just on the staff trusting in those things and each other, and the work you guys did was incredible, so I thank you for that. This was so much easier to follow, and you know, there's plenty of praise to go around, and I want to make sure that I spread it, so thank you.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I literally requested a leave of absence from my job in 2017 because I felt so overwhelmed by my first ever budget process and wanted to make sure as a new council member I was understanding everything. This is much more clear and straightforward, and not just for us as a council, but I've got to imagine this is a lot easier for the community to understand as well, which is really important as part of trying to be a transparent government. So props to our new city manager for helping guide us, and to our financial department and our budget advisory committee for really doing hard work on this. I really, I appreciate these thoughtful policy proposals. I've got one small ask in here, and it's not really a policy direction, but we are taking 2.5% out of our general capital improvement fund and putting it to public art, which I think is fantastic and in line with Emory values. However, I've got an ask here. It is that you consider ways to partner with BPAC and Public Works to do art in public spaces in ways that enriches our public space. BPAC has requested to do better wayfinding, and I suggested they go talk to the art committee about that and create better wayfinding through public art on our city streets. And I would really ask you to look at those kind of opportunities, since this is coming out of our capital improvement fund, as a way to use art to better improve our local infrastructure. So that is my one ask here tonight. Other than that, I think we're all in agreement that these are great policy recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If there are no further changes, we will produce a budget for you and publish it Friday. And it will be on your June 4th agenda for consideration for adoption, along with the capital improvement program, which will also be on your June 4th agenda for consideration for adoption.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I guess with that, we don't need a motion on this action item. We are going to go ahead and adjourn this special meeting at 6:26. It is 7:15 p.m. I call to order the City of Council as a successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bouders?
Here.
Councilmember Donahue?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Here.
And Mayor Medina.
Here. Can I get an approval of the final agenda?
I move that we approve
Second.
the final agenda.
We got a motion by Member Donahue, a second by Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any ex parte communications to report for this agenda?
No.
None for me. Any public comment for this agenda, consent agenda or items not on this agenda?
What meeting are we at?
We're at the successor agency, so not the main show. This is the blue one. All right. If no public comment for this meeting, we're going to move on to the consent calendar.
Move the consent calendar.
We've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a motion by member. Yes.
This is public comment?
Yes, public.
Things that are also unrelated to today's meeting?
Yes.
But for the successor agency.
For the successor
This
agency
is
agenda.
Not the regular council meeting yet.
You can do this for the next one too. Yeah. All right. So we've got a motion by Member Bouders, a second by Vice Mayor Pats.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned at 7:17 p.m. 7:17 p.m. I call to order the regular City Council meeting of the City of Emeryville. We're now onto the green agenda. We're all still here, so there's no reason to call the roll. Can I get approval of the final agenda?
Madam Mayor, may I? I have a request this evening. I'd like to, I have something sad to report, unfortunately, but I'd like to ask that tonight we adjourn in the memory of Jean Suchek, the mother of John Gooding. She passed away at 104 years old this morning. She was a longtime resident of Emeryville and lived at the Watermark on the bay right over here. And Mr. Gooding has been in the community for over 35 years. And so I just ask with that request, I'll move the approval of the agenda to adjourn this evening in her memory.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Second.
All right. We've got a motion from Member Bouders, a second from Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any special orders of the day? Nope.
I have none.
Okay. Any announcement of commission or committee vacancies?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Applications were due yesterday, May 20th at 5 p.m. We are now moving forward to present applications to you for this the special City Council meeting on June 18th. Please note that you will be conducting Planning Commission interviews prior to the other advisory committees and bodies.
Thank you. All right. Council member special announcements or reports on meetings attended. Yes, Member Bouders.
I have one item, Madam Mayor. Tomorrow, May 22nd, 2019, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Berkeley Senior Center, which is located at 2939 Ellis Street in Berkeley, the California Department of Transportation will be holding a public meeting for the cities of Berkeley and Emeryville to discuss. That was a Freudian slip if there was ever going to be one. I'll come back to my second comment in a moment. To discuss the proposed reconstruction of the I-80 Ashby interchange, which was designed to be improving access, safety, traffic circulation, as well as a bike pedestrian connection at Ashby across the bridge to Frontage Road and the Bay Trail. If you're interested in attending, it's a public hearing. It will be there for 2 hours at the Berkeley Senior Center. The other update I have, Caltrans, which is my pen pal now, update on the MacArthur Maze. I would like to report that I had a meeting with District 4 Director Tavares about the proposed demolition and reconstruction of bridges in the maze. I want to thank again the city staff for all their work with me on that. I have received confirmation that Caltrans is in the process of working with the state CTC, where they receive their funding from, to review the process for formally rescinding the environmental document as we requested, which would put Caltrans back at square one on this process. And they have committed to reaching out to the staff and the council members of Emeryville. They will not pick this project back up this year. If they do so, it will be done in the future.
That is fantastic news. Thank you very much. Any other announcements? I've got one. I attended the STEM Career Awareness Day last Friday at Wareham Development, which brought together, I think, about 100 high school students from Oakland, Berkeley, and Emeryville high schools. They got to meet with scientists in fields they were interested in. It seemed really interesting, well attended. The kids were really excited to actually get to sit down one-on-one and kind of envision a career path for themselves in STEM. And yeah, I think it was a great local event hosted in Emeryville. City Manager's report.
None this evening, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Ex parte communications to report.
Madam Mayor?
Yep.
On item 12.2, I spoke with representatives from eBase, Alameda Labor Council, SCIU 10-1, Unite Here. I received a communication from the Building Trades Council, and I've had several emails from the public that I believe are printed and available for anyone here at this meeting and also in the public record.
Yes, Member Batters.
On item 12.2, I had all the same meetings that Councilmember Martinez had. On item 12.4, I've discussed with Townsend Public Affairs. On item 12.5, I've had a meeting with SEIU 10-1, the Alameda County Local 55 Firefighters Union, the Emeryville Peace Officers Association, the Alameda County Building Trades Association, Wareham Development, and Bay Street.
Okay. I've got the same communications on 12.2 to report, but also on 12.4, have talked with Townsend Public Affairs and the Office of Assemblymember Tank.
Same for 12.2, and that's it.
Same for 12.2.
Oh, I've got one more.
Oh, yeah.
And I met with Local 55 on item 12.5.
Thank you. All right, public comment for consent agenda items or items not on today's agenda. Unless I have a card for you, which I do think I do for you, Mr. Sway.
Thank you. I'm here to challenge the proposal by ONI Company to create the 54-story and 20-story steel and glass office building on Christie Avenue. I am a longtime resident of Emeryville since 1989. I've raised a family of 5 here. I'm a UC Berkeley interdisciplinary doctorate in architecture and education. I've written 7 books that are published internationally on architecture and ecology. And I have been a professor at several universities in America and 4 in China. I think that the Omni proposal is a architectural and ecological failure. It's a failure in 3 very major ways. One is that the HVAC systems of the building as designed will produce, from my estimations, over 20 tons of CO2 gas, which is toxic, and also that's about the same as just for your knowledge, about 1,600 cars. The exhaust produced by 1,600 cars a day is the equivalent to the 20 tons produced by this building. Also, the glass surfaces would transmit about 60% of the interior cooling or heating to the outside. So you're wasting 60% of the energy of the building. And also that the ecological footprint of the building to create the steel and glass and concrete and other materials used to create the building would be an ecological disaster. Emeryville, design matters. Emeryville matters. Nature matters. And nature is dying. And we have no place to run to. The Bay Area is a haven for passive architectural design. And no one here is using that to our advantage. I propose to create a building that would be an answer to many of these problems that the ONI people are proposing. And that building would be it would have the same amount of square footage. So the density, the livability, the ecological sustainability would be the same, or more. That building would be in the form of a parabolic arch, so that the city of Emeryville would become the gateway to the East Bay. And that arch would be made out of glue laminated wood, which is 40 stories high, and would have in its archway, through the Venturi effect, would have a tree-shaped windmill system that would power all of the energy needed to the building without additional energy.
Thank you, Mr.
Do you want me to
Sweat.
continue?
Sorry, that's your time.
Okay, thank you.
I have another comment card from Nan Parks about climate emergency resolution, which I don't believe is on the agenda, so now's your time.
Thank you very much. My name is Nan Parks. Good evening. I'm a resident of Emeryville and president of the governing board of 350 Bay Area. I come here as a mother and a grandmother concerned about the climate emergency and how it may affect the health and welfare and safety of all children in the Bay Area and beyond. I'm putting forth 2 climate emergency resolutions requesting approval by the city of Emeryville. The first one is endorsing the declaration that there is a climate emergency and requesting regional collaboration on immediate, just transition and emergency mobilization effort to restore a safe climate. And the second one is a fossil-free resolution. It's a resolution to move Emeryville to 100% clean, renewable energy and oppose new fossil fuel projects. Whereas climate change is real, caused by humans, and affirmed by overwhelming scientific evidence, there is no credible path to a safe climate that includes new fossil fuel infrastructure. I see my presentation today, this evening, as a beginning dialogue to create a climate resolution that reflects the strongest specific needs of Emeryville. I am part of a coalition of community groups that would be very willing to collaborate with you on this. 11 cities have passed the climate resolution: Alameda, Berkeley, Chico, Fairfax, Hayward, Mendocino County, Oakland, Richmond, San Francisco, Santa Cruz County, and I'm hoping that Emeryville will be number 12. So I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm proud to live in Emeryville, and I'm willing to step up to do anything I can to help.
Yes, Member Martinez.
Madam Mayor, if you may allow me a brief response. Council had previously asked Scott and I to work on an older version of these resolutions, so we will take what I understand is a new version, and we will look at those and then make sure that staff gets a chance to review them and come back.
Okay,
Thank you.
Do I need to present this?
You can give it to the city clerk and he can make sure that Councilmember Donahue and I both get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment for consent agenda items or items not on the agenda?
Okay, like it or not, Emeryville is required, we are required by state law to plan our growth. Every city in California has to plan its growth, and every city produces a general plan that is evidence of the citizen involvement in formulating the growth plan. So we have a general plan, and our general plan says that by the sunset of it, by the way, the plan cost us almost $500,000. It cost taxpayers about $500,000 to produce. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. $2 million. I'm sorry, $2 million. Okay, our general plan sunsets in 2029, and we know that in that year we're going to have very close to, if not, pretty much spot on, 16,500 citizens living in Emeryville. That's what we've been planning on, and the ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, agrees with that's the number that we should be shooting for. And we've this was achieved by city planning experts. This number is 16,500, and by residents. Now this has all been upset by by Diane Martinez, Councilwoman Diane Martinez, who is now positing that is no longer applicable. The 16,500 is no longer any good, according to Councilwoman Martinez. That number is far too low, she says. We need a lot more housing, she told us here in this chamber a couple months ago. And so we like to plan here in Emeryville. So my question is to Ms. Martinez. First off, how do you know we need a lot more housing here, a lot more people to live here? How do you know that? And then, you should tell us this. Because we should have, planning should be rational and cogent, not capriciously based. So we need to know how many, and how do you know and how many? so that we can plan and change our documents to reflect what you say we need to have. So could you please tell us, where do you get the information that we need a lot more residents than what the ABAG says and our general plan says? And then number two, how many more? What's the number so that we can begin planning for it? And I defer to Councilwoman Martinez's good judgment, so we'll change our general plan to reflect what she says, presumably. But you need to tell us, we can't just have it be capricious and just have it be opinion based. It's got to be factual and based on fact based, evidence based. So if you could tell us those two things, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Member Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a brief response to the previous speaker. Mr. Donahue, your statements are inaccurate.
All right, moving right along. Any other public comment for consent agenda items not on the agenda? Yes, Mr. Wax.
We need a lot more housing.
All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move the
for
consent calendar.
Got a motion for consent. Do we have a second? Well, we've got a motion from Member Bowders. We've got a second from Vice Mayor Pats. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right. Passes. No public hearings tonight. All right, first action item, 12.1, South Bayfront Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge in Horton Landing Park. As he approaches the podium slowly, I'd like to ask my fellow council members, do you think we need a presentation on this item tonight?
Presentation.
What?
Waive presentation.
We all waive the presentation? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, are you going to take all public comment on all these at one time then, please?
Yes, I'm going to take public comment on all of these at one time. This is regarding the South Bayfront Bridge. Any public comment for the South Bayfront Bridge? Items 12.1.1, 12.1.2, and 12.1.3. Seeing none.
4 and
Four and
0.5.
five.
Oh, and I didn't even flip it.
There are 5
12.1.4,
resolutions, Madam Mayor.
12.1.5. All right. Seeing no public comment for all 5 of those, do we have any motions?
Madam Mayor, I'll move resolution 12.1.1 for the City Council to approve the bid results and appropriate the money for fiscal year 18-19.
Thank you for saying all of that out loud for me. All right. We've got a motion from Member Batters, a second from Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. 12.1.2. Any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve 12.1.2, a resolution of the City Council approving and authorizing the expenditure of $410,000 to Union Pacific for flagging and track restoration.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. We've got a motion from Member Bowders, a second from Vice Mayor Pats. Everyone else, pull your weight here. Can we call the roll?
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. 12.1.3. Come on, Scott.
Resolution of the City of Emeryville authorizing the city manager to execute and amend number 3 to the professional services agreement with the...
Is that a motion, Scott?
That's a motion.
Second.
Okay, we had a motion from Member Donahue, a second from Member Bowders. Let's call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. 12.1.4.
I will move 12.1.4, resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville authorizing the city manager to execute amendment number 1 to the professional services agreements with EKI, granting a time extension.
Second.
We got a motion from Member Martinez and a second from Vice Mayor Pats. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. 12.1.5.
I move we approve the meter fees to East Bay Mud.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you for the creative renaming. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. And that takes us to 12.2.
Before we do that, Madam Mayor, I just want to thank Andrew and I want to thank all the staff for getting us to 12.1 finished and getting ready to start. We're going to build the Bayfront Bridge, and I'm happy about that.
Round of applause.
Our project manager, Todd, just walked out the
He
door.
just bounced before we clapped.
Him too.
It's on tape. We can play it back for him. All right. 12.2, introduction, first reading of an ordinance of the City of Emeryville, amending sections 537 and 53702 of Chapter 37 of the Emeryville Municipal Code with respect to minimum wage for employees of small independent restaurants.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Chad Smalley, the Economic Development and Housing Manager of the city. As you mentioned, this is an introduction and first reading of a proposed amendment to our minimum wage, paid sick leave, and other employment standards, otherwise known as the minimum wage ordinance. So by way of background, on May 7th, a couple of weeks ago, we brought to you a report of our business conditions survey, the second edition of that survey, principally related to the city's labor standards, which include fair work week, minimum wage, and Measure C. And in that study and in the report, we noted that the increase in the existing ordinance, the minimum wage is set to increase to $16.30 an hour for all businesses effective July 1st of 2019. As a result of that discussion, the City Council directed staff to prepare an ordinance amendment that would pause the minimum wage at $15 an hour, but only for a very limited set of employers, those employers being small, independent food service businesses, and this council suggested that we utilize the business license tax rebate program as the model for developing that definition for that class of employers. And the council asked that we bring that back today. And so here we are. We've drafted the amendment, and it's attached to your staff report. What the amendment does is it adds that definition of small independent restaurants, and it defines them as a place with 12 or less locations globally, whether associated with a franchise or not. And it establishes that it pauses the minimum wage at $15 an hour for that class of businesses. As I mentioned before, that definition was derived from the rebate program. This was designed per the City Council's direction to narrowly tailored to achieve the city's interest in encouraging the continued viability of small independent restaurants and their contribution to the broader economy of Emeryville. And here we have the actual, on your screen you can see the actual definition, which relies on the planning code definition for restaurants. So that's a pretty broad definition in that it includes cafes, anything where you're eating and drinking. It does not include bars, but it does include cafes, whether they're limited service or full service restaurants with 12 or fewer locations globally. And that's the gist of the amendment. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Yes, Member Martinez.
Chad, can you tell us when the $16.30 wage was published for the public, so that employers and workers would know to expect that bump on July 1st?
It was around the week of April 15th this year.
Okay, thank you.
To clarify that, these rates were set in 2016, though?
The rates were set to use a CPI escalator, which is not known until the year has passed.
Right.
So it's typically in spring when we publish those figures.
Okay, thank you.
I have a clarifying question.
Yes, Member Donahue.
So this ordinance would pause at 15, not including any cost of living escalator over the past year on that section. Is that correct?
That's correct. As drafted, it just pauses.
And going forward, if nothing were done, it would remain paused with no cost of living escalator as a part of that subclass of workers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions? All right. Thank you, Chad. I'm going to open this up for public comment. I'll make a quick note first. I've received several public comment cards. If you have those and you haven't passed them up, please pass them up so I can call you in order. But you don't need to fill out a card to speak. I'll just call for general public comment after we're done with the cards. So the first people up, and I'll call you up a few at a time so you know you're coming next. We're going to start with Andrea Malarkey, then it'll be Jeffrey Croder, and then Kate O'Hara. So Andrea, please kick us off. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Malarkey. I am a member leader and rank and file member of SEIU 10-1, and I'm here tonight urging you to not take up this minimum wage carve-out and to stand with workers as you have done and made a nice reputation for yourselves on, and I hope that you'll stand with that. In passing the initial minimum wage ordinance, you really set yourselves out as a leader in racial equity and rights for workers. And other cities joined you in this effort, and there are now stronger minimum wage ordinances around the region, and you should rightfully be very proud of that. Tonight you have before you an ordinance that will roll back these important gains. And frankly, SEIU 10-1 stands with all working people, and we oppose categorically any carve-outs. We believe fundamentally that all workers deserve the basic dignity of a living wage, and that should be regardless of the size of their employer. I understand there might be impacts to small businesses, but frankly, that shouldn't be borne on the backs of working people, the lowest paid people in your city. This is bad for workers, and frankly, it's bad for Emeryville. If you realize that this is based on a rushed process and a really poorly done study. The methodology of the study is not based on data, and it's not even based on quantitative data from the respondents themselves, and it doesn't engage the stakeholders that were with you initially in drafting the ordinance. Frankly, it's going to hurt workers in Emeryville, and it could hurt workers throughout the region as it signals to other jurisdictions that minimum wage is back on the table. This would be a stain on your good reputation. It would be backtracking on the hard work you've done, and frankly, we are here to urge you not to pass this minimum wage carve-out. We want you to stand with the lowest paid workers in this town and ensure that you build an Emeryville where all people, white, black, and brown, can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Croder.
I just wanted to open with, you are
Mike.
so misinformed.
Mike, please.
You got to use the microphone.
Yeah.
You are so misinformed. You do not know what you're talking about. Minimum wage should be a regional effort. It should be every municipality in the San Francisco Bay Area should have the same minimum wage so businesses operate on the same playing field. When you have businesses in surrounding communities that are $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 difference, it puts the people on the high end at such a disadvantage. If the townhouse were in Oakland, a mile away, operating on the same costs except payroll, we would have a $200,000 difference than the $16.30 an hour, because Oakland's only $13.80. Now, $200,000 means we have to come up with $600,000 more a year just to make the same amount of money. $600,000. Do any of you know how to make $600,000 more a year? Not just this year, but next year, the year after? Oh, $700,000 maybe, $800,000? When does it stop? How do you do that? And since the minimum wage order was passed, every year, when I first came in, I said, we got to do 40% more. We've got to increase business. We've got to work our asses off. And we have. And we have increased business, but every year we make less money. And the people that got screwed the most are the people that you want to stand up for. They got screwed. They used to make $5, $7, $8 more than the minimum wage. Now they make $1 or $2 more than the minimum wage. And they have to work twice as hard because our kitchen can't grow. So they're putting out twice the amount of meals to make just a little bit more money. It's ridiculous. 43 states have a two-tiered wage for tipped employees. And you get to define that. Texas defines it as, $2.37 an hour for the federal minimum. But you don't have to do that. You can say whatever you want it to be, and you can define what a tipped employee is. Somebody that works at a Starbucks or whatever and gets $20 at the end of the day is not a tipped employee. But a person who walks out with $100 at the end of the day, or $200 or $300 or $400, that's a tipped employee. There are no restaurants coming to Emeryville. If you look at the market center, if you look at the mall, there are a lot of vacant spaces. There used to be big restaurants in the market center. They're gone. Nobody can come here. Nobody can make it viable. And we're starting our 29th year. I mean, we've finished our 29th year. We're starting our 30th year. And we don't know if we can do it much longer. And Ellen and I have been working to keep the restaurant open because of a dedication to the 40-plus employees that work there. And some of them have been there 15, 20 years. And we've helped some of those people go to college, have their kids go to college. And we're looking at going, why are we doing this? This is super stressful. Every year we make less money. We're getting to the point where when our next lease comes up, why do we want to be here? Why would anybody want to be here? Nobody's coming here. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Kate?
Did you leave something on the podium?
No, that was from, I believe, the reporter.
Oh. Never mind.
Okay, Kate O'Hara? All right, you're going to go by the back of the pile. Next up, Liz Ortega. And following her will be Lenny Farrell and Marilyn Boucher, so you know when you're ready.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Liz Ortega, representing the Alameda Labor Council,
Please no side
135,000
conversations
members.
in the chamber, thank you. We can't hear.
135,000 workers across Alameda County, and tonight we're here opposing this vote. While I can understand the need to support small businesses and restaurants, I cannot understand why you would do it on the backs of workers. It's a shame that most people in the Bay Area can't even make it on $70,000 a year, let alone a $33,000 a year salary that they were expecting in July. So I hope that by pausing this wage increase tonight for workers, it will help you sleep at night, because it's not going to help those who were expecting this raise and whose rent increase is not going to pause, whose health care costs are not going to pause, and whose food cost is not going to pause. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lenny O'Farrell. Lenny Farrell.
Madam Mayor, good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, thank you. I just wanted to say I was encouraged by the May 7th meeting, council member Bowder's remarks about Townhouse and Rudy's, Can't Fail. These are landmarks for Emeryville. And how's it going to feel if these restaurants close and all we have are just sort of the box store strip mall food options? That's going to be pretty dull. So, and I think we saw from the Mills College survey, it was well presented, but it's very limited, that kind of data. Because if you ask a business owner, they're going to be opposed to the increase, to the wage increase. If you ask a server, of course, they're going to be for it. But if you ask that server, well, we're going to increase your minimum wage to $16.30, but in 6 months you're going to lose your job because Townhouse is going to close because they can't afford to stay open, I think they maybe look at the big picture and say, well, you know what, I have it pretty good because I get tips. So the owner of Townhouse just wanted me to say Seattle did go to 15. They were the most aggressive, and they've backtracked to 12. So I don't know if this is the right metaphor, but if you think about trying to pull up a tent, and that tent is livability for businesses and residents in Emeryville, you're not going to just pull from one end, and that's what the wage increase seems to be. What good is a $1.30 increase in your hourly wage if your rent increases $200, $300, $500 a month? If I had a little more security with my rent, I would say, yeah, okay, I can go out and spend more and eat more and enjoy that disposable income. So, sorry, I'm a little nervous, but I think that's all I need to say. Thank you very much.
Ms. Boucher.
Thank you. I think you all received a copy of a letter that was signed by 23 local small independent restaurant owners or operators. So I won't go into that. I hope people who haven't read it, there are copies out in the front, will. I want to comment instead on some of the things that have been brought up in other late correspondence and said here. First of all, the idea that this is a rush to change the MWO. I think what you're doing is absolutely the opposite. From the beginning, the idea was, or the promise of the council to the business community, was that there would be studies along the way to show, so that we could understand what the impact on business was and see if the MWO needed to be amended in any way. In this case, the study didn't even come to the council until May 7th. You've had to jump through hoops to try to even have a chance to vote on pausing it. And saying, well, let it go ahead. I'm not expecting you, no one would expect you to raise weights once they've been set. So what you have decided to do is to pause and study carefully what the effect is and what the value of the small independent restaurant business is to Emeryville. So I congratulate you for that. You don't have to prove your bona fides as far as a champion of low-wage workers. I hope you'll be setting a new example for cities taking a more nuanced look at how minimum wage increases affect different sectors and how small independent businesses can be preserved. it's, people have said it's unfair to take structural imbalances out on the wage of on the backs of minimum wage owners, employees, sorry. Why is it fair to take it out on the backs of small independent business people? It's not a question just of what it takes them to live. And by the way, if there's also say you make living in Emeryville possible, if you actually think people living in Emeryville can do that on $15 an hour or even $16, $30 an hour, you're wrong. The people who are earning this here are people from out of town, almost exclusively. And that may or may not be a difference to you, but I think that is a misunderstanding. You know, the small business owners, we suffer from the same high cost of living and everyone else does. We have a rent increase in our business, and we have to deal with housing costs in our own lives. So, you know, as much as we might like to give everyone a living wage, if that's far beyond what our businesses can produce, that's hardly fair. People have said that the city's given us many perks. Well, they mentioned the business rebate. The increase in the minimum wage from one year to the next increased my payroll $50,000. My business rebate was $1,500.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we've got Gabriel Holland, Jake Freed, and a second chance for Kate O'Hara.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Gabriel Holland with SEIU 1021. You know, it's already been stated, and I just want to reiterate the fact that the study was so poorly done. You know, self-selected, honestly, you know, 50% of the questions weren't answered. There's a number of problems that concern me. The fact that no low-wage workers were consulted about the impacts. You know, what jumps out at me is that they didn't ask other questions like, are there other business pressures that might make you fail, like high rents? I mean, to be fair, the likelihood that a business is going to fail is probably less to do with whether or not they give a wage increase and much more to do with the high rents that they're facing.
Bullshit. Stop.
Decorum in the chamber, please.
Stop.
You know, I'll say this. I've been working on minimum wage ordinances for the last 17 years. I worked on the first one in San Francisco in 2002. And often the same arguments are made over and over again. And frequently what we find is that the small businesses that were going to fail, and this has actually been borne out by studies by the UC Labor Center, that the businesses that were going to fail were probably going to fail anyway for other reasons that had nothing to do with raising the minimum wage. I'll say this. Now it's seen as Tom Amiano's legislation around healthcare ordinance in San Francisco, that businesses have to pay for health care. Again, the same arguments were made. Businesses are going to fail, blah, blah, blah. They didn't, by and large, fail. And honestly, now it's seen as this groundbreaking, and it's held up by Gavin Newsom and others as, the, you know, this, I mean, you see New York Times, LA Times, the same arguments that are being made tonight were made then about how businesses couldn't afford it and they were going to fail and then people weren't going to have a job, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, I feel like I'm on this loop of the same arguments over and over again because we've worked in and pushed minimum wage ordinances in multiple cities, including Richmond. The thing that also I just got to point out is that, you know, quite honestly, these workers are working 2 or 3 jobs in order to pay their rent. And, you know, they were depending on these wage increases so that, you know, the CPI escalator, that's because the cost of living has gone up. That's why they're getting an increase, not just some random reason that was in the ordinance, but because the cost of living actually went up. The cost of food, the cost of rent, all these things. You know, you may think that some people might be able to sleep good at night, but some people are going to be sleeping on the street because they can't afford their rent. And, you know, I just want to point out that these things are not random sort of speculative things. You know, when rent increases go up, people in Los Angeles, they just say 30% of the people...
That's your time. Thank you. Jake Freed?
Good evening, thank you. I own 2 businesses in Emeryville. I've invested in this community twice in the last 4 years. I've put my family's savings into the city of Emeryville. I have 2 liens on my house as a result of my investment in Emeryville, so that I could afford to build my businesses here. But we can't make any money here. My wife has worked in my Emeryville business for 2 years full-time without a single paycheck. So I hear about this being on the backs of low-wage workers. Well, it's on the backs of us. Every time my workers get a government-mandated raise, that's just another step further we are from being able to bring in even $1 of a paycheck to our home, despite the fact that we have invested a huge amount of money and time and emotion and energy into the businesses that are in this city. And the notion that we should just keep doing this, that small businesses, any businesses, should be exclusively responsible for funding this is just not tenable. I mean, who is going to pay for this? Do we have to just keep raising our prices, continuing to alienate our customers? Emeryville's a small place. People just go outside the city to somewhere else to eat. We have raised our prices 4 years running. If this wage increase goes up, we'll raise it again. We have already cut hours and cut employees. We will continue cutting hours and cutting employees. So the more you do this, the fewer jobs we're going to be offering. It's extremely troubling that I don't vote in Emeryville. I don't live here, but I've put my money here. But I can't do anything when you decide that I have to pay for these workers, and I want them to get paid well. Obviously, I do, but there's a limit to what we can afford. There's a limit to how much we can charge for a product. There are high rents. We are paying essentially for people, like one of the earlier commenters said, who don't even live in this town. I don't have any workers that live in Emeryville. We have workers from Richmond. We have workers from San Pablo. They come into Emeryville to get a better wage that you've mandated. I have to pay for it, and at the end of the day, I go home with a lot of stress and a lot of debt and a lot of nothing to show for it, and it's getting harder and harder every year. And I wonder how this dynamic is affecting the fact that we can't get a grocery store. I have 2 businesses in public market. I invested there because they're building a grocery store. They're doing all of this stuff to make a holistic community. That grocery store is sat empty for the last 2 years because no one wants to lease here, because they can't afford to do business here. If they can't afford to lease here, there's no anchor tenant. That means my business can't get off the ground anymore. I can't drive any more traffic here. Sales continue to be flat or declining. Wages and rents keep going up. And
That's your time.
Thank you.
Kate O'Hara? Nope. Okay. Mystery card. Alvin Shen.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alvin Shen. I'm one of the owners at Best Coast Burritos here in Emeryville. Let's try to get some stuff off the table in 3 minutes or less. A lot of people come up here, a lot of people speak, a lot of people share their opinions. Some are representing labor unions, some of them are representing bigger groups. But I feel like the council should definitely hear from the voice of people who've been here for generations, who have had restaurants here and who are here. My wife and my family, we've had restaurants here since the late 80s. Ronald Reagan was in the White House when we first began doing small businesses and restaurants here. A lot has changed, and for the first time in our family's history, we look at our lease, we look at our prospects of continuing doing business here in the future, and for the first time, we've all looked at each other and said, we don't know if we're going to renew our lease when this ends. We don't know if we're going to continue to do business. I had opportunities with my landlord 2 doors down to occupy a space on the corner of Hollis and Powell with a new food concept. I decided I don't think I want to do it. There's a lot that's been shared, and I'm going to just use one kind of metaphor and analogy that I feel like was part of when in 2015 when NWO was passed, and it's been progressing along. One size doesn't fit all. When you have something you have to address and you choose to approach it with a battle axe instead of a scalpel, the consequences will bear itself. Mr. Bowders, I know you like to ice skate. May I ask you a question? What size shoe do you, or what size skate do you wear when you ice skate?
When I'm done with public comment, I'll answer the question.
Okay. Let's pretend Mr. Bowders wears a size 10 just for good measure. If you were to go out and ice skate and you were to start out with a size 10, but there was the ice rink required you that after you're done skating, the next time you go out there, you have to wear a size 11. Maybe you can make that happen. Maybe you can tie your laces a little bit tighter, and you can try to your best to skate as best as you can. You might be able to do it at size 11. The next year they say, okay, next time you go out there to the ice skate, the ice rink at the ice rink down in Oakland, they say, okay, well this time, Mr. Bowders, I think you need to wear a size 12 to skate. And let's just keep going down that road. The way that this applies to you is that at some point you might be able to still skate, but at some point you're going to say, you know what, this is painful, this doesn't work, this doesn't fit my shoe size, this doesn't make sense. At some point you say, I don't think I can skate anymore. I don't think I can make this happen. This doesn't make any sense. The way that we're looking at this is very similar. It doesn't fit for everybody. And that's why I really strongly encourage you to really look at this and look at what you're considering and say, does some of these policies fit? When you have a wide sweeping policy that to enact change, but it doesn't really fit everybody, a lot of people lose. A lot of people lose. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right, we have no more speaker cards, but anyone else who wants to give public comment is welcome to do so.
For the record, Madam Mayor, I'm a size 10 shoe and an 8.5 skate in hockey.
Put it on your Amazon wish list.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. I am Nasser Azimi with East Bay Therapeutics Dispensary. You know, it's a tough decision. I definitely support the idea of implementing a policy that is community sensitive. And in that context, I don't think it really establishes the inability for these operations to provide raises to their folks. It just gives them the option. It gives them a fixed cost in the context of establishing their operational platform. But that doesn't mean as they make their $600,000-$700,000 a year, they're not going to give raises to their folks. So I believe that this is a good, responsible approach, and I appreciate Chad working hard to bring the details to the table for you to make that decision. What we found over the past year is that the higher wages do in fact attract better resources to the table. We have highly skilled individuals that come in because Emeryville does have a higher minimum wage rate, and in that context we do appreciate that approach, but also understand where the situation is for the small businesses and do support the measure in the way that it's been crafted. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? Yes. Come on up.
Okay, so what we heard from these business owners here tonight was it won't pencil out. That's what they're telling you. It will not, this minimum wage increase for the lowest paid workers in Emeryville won't pencil out. Now, that's what every developer says when they come before the five of you. The project the better project that is being proposed won't pencil out. Instead, we have to build a lousy project. This is what we've heard for 30 years. It won't pencil out. And in the past, Emeryville has always deferred to business owners coming before you and saying it won't pencil out. But people with a material interest in lying tend to lie. So, might some of these businesses go under if this happens? Yeah, possibly. You don't know because you have to assume that they're probably lying. But maybe some of them aren't lying, maybe. And you know what? Those are called non-viable businesses. Now, Marilyn Boucher from
please do not make me ask you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Boucher from the Broken Rack said, you know, as much as we'd like to pay a living wage to our workers, that's a direct quote she just said. So she can't pay a living wage. That's not a viable business in my town. We don't want to turn our town into a locus of suffering, okay? Just so we can have these business owners make a go of it. If you can't make a go of it and pay a living wage, that's not a legitimate business. Okay, so I'm reminded tonight here about Measure C, from the first iteration of Measure C, the hotel workers' wage increase. We were told the hospitality industry would collapse in Emeryville if we pay our workers $9 an hour, and you know, right after we okayed that, we opened a 5th hotel. So you know, it's like we hear this time and time again. But I want to read here real quickly. Today I was reading from The Guardian. I happened to read this, and listen to this, 2 sentences. the core democratic principle is that people should have a meaningful say in political decisions that affect their lives. This is about abortion, big rollbacks. I mean, making abortion illegal. There is no reason to respect the legitimacy of this kind of political decision in which those in power show no sign of having listened to the people they're deciding on behalf of. And that's the big takeaway here tonight. The people of Emeryville should know, and I guess that's the camera, I'll talk to the camera, that the City Council of Emeryville listened to the businesses for starting last summer when this business survey was done. It wasn't a labor survey, it was a business survey. And then the businesses have had, the city has rolled out the red carpet to the business community, but they have not done anything for informing the labor in our town about this. And the only reason why labor has found out about it, this rush job, is because I got on the phone and I called eBase, for instance, East Bay Alliance for Sustainable Economy. That's the group that helped write the original 2015 ordinance. And
That's your time.
you didn't even have the respect to let the labor interests know. Thank you.
All right, any other public comment? Thanks.
I just want to say I know this is very tense for everyone and difficult, but I really think that the workers deserve and should get their wages, the minimum wage, and also the other things that we agreed to for them. And we should find ways to help our local businesses succeed. I do want to agree and support what an earlier speaker said about being able to get better quality workers. When you pay more, you have more choice. What we have seen in other places is when the pay is not as good, that people can't keep their workers, and they end up either closing or doing reduced hours. They lose out anyway because they cannot get the workers they need to work for them. So in the big picture, I think it would be better for both the small businesses and for the workers to have their minimum wage. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move this for discussion, and I'm going to take the privilege I have as mayor of starting us off on this, which I typically don't do, but I feel very, very strongly about this, and it's something that I want to engage on. I want to thank everyone for coming here and having their voices heard tonight on either side of the issue, and I assure you that I've spent the last 2 weeks really reading every single email that's been sent to me, poring over minimum wage studies from across the country and in other countries, and trying to engage with our small business owners as well as our local working community. As a council, there's 5 progressive people up here who want both workers to have a good life and who also want small businesses to thrive and create a vibrant Emeryville. That's something all of us want. This minimum wage step up, we got the actual number in April 15th. This was decided in 2016. So this is a long time coming, and the fact that we've got small and large businesses coming together now on the minimum wage is not a shock. It's something we've known is coming. And at the time of the 2016 decision to go forward with these minimum wage increases, which were historic and raised Emeryville to, I believe, the highest in the nation at that time, there was a promise made to engage with the business community and reconsider depending on what the setbacks might be. And we've done that. We've spent over $300,000, not just on enforcement, but also on studies and outreach to our business and working community. And so that's why I agreed to have this conversation move forward for discussion, because I think it's really important for us to learn from what's happening on both sides here. I've got some problems with the data set that's been presented to us. We're making decisions based on a report that I find to be deeply, deeply flawed. And there's several reasons, but I'd like to bring up figure 4, if possible, as indicative of exactly what the biggest issue is. It's on that slideshow. We tried. Okay, so if you look at this graph, it looks like you've got some really high outlying bars here for where business is worse in Emeryville, and also that the morale is higher when you increase the minimum wage. If you examine these numbers, you've got kind of 3 different questions mostly here. Is business worse? Is business better? Do you have decreased productivity? Do you have increased productivity? Is morale lower or is morale higher? If you add the numbers up for affirmative and negative, they do not add up to 100. And what you notice is the most common answer is that people did not respond to the question. And this is from a survey that went out to 300 businesses and had 101 respondents, meaning this is a highly self-selecting group of respondents, and over half of this 100 did not reply to most of these questions. This is an extraordinarily small data set we're working with. This is on par with what I turned in for, I think, a middle school science fair where I had 50 respondents for questions. Like, this is actually not very good data at all. And so I spent a lot of time kind of looking at this and seeing if I could get anything from this data set. And there's a few things I have gotten from this report. I think what's become clear is that restaurants are the hardest hit by this, and that restaurants who opened a longer time ago, because their business models were centered around on lower wage levels, are having a harder time than newer restaurants who have more of a fast casual or counter service approach. Those are two things we've pulled out of this. But in terms of specific reactions to things, it's very hard to say with any confidence that this data set is telling us too much. I'm going to continue down. I've got some on this list. If you go to a later set in here where it asks, what are your main concerns and what is the most negative things for your business, 4% of businesses responded that the tax rebate program, which literally has the city giving them money, is negative for business. So again, it calls into question how clearly worded were these questions, because that is literally a handout of money from the city to businesses. So I can tell you, I think your margin of error is at minimum 4% here, but probably much, much higher. So I'd like to get into some data that I think is actually good. And there have been a big push in studies for minimum wage increase because there's a lot of debate historically over whether or not it's good or bad for the economy. And I spent a lot of time looking for these. Seattle's minimum wage, which was recently noticed, there were some controversial studies around that. One study said that there were employment drop-offs. There was a big argument about that, and several studies came out to contradict that and became kind of a professor versus professor fight. But if you dig down on the Seattle studies, University of Washington published two highly targeted studies. One of them tracked childcare service workers, and they looked at 41 different childcare providers, and they tracked them over the entire duration. They did in-depth reviews. They looked at their enrollment rates. They looked at their prices. And they found that, yes, in some cases, hours were cut to accommodate because this is extremely high labor. But overall, the amount of price passed on to the consumer was smaller than that the low-wage earners took home. Another one actually looked at the prices in Seattle supermarkets for inside where the wage area was affecting and compared it to other counties where the minimum wage had not gone up. What they found, over 106 items adjusted per calorie, was that there was no increase in the price per nutrient density or caloric content of the food before the minimum wage went into effect, during the step-ups, or after, meaning that low-wage workers in Seattle had better access to nutrient-rich foods after a minimum wage increase. They had better earning power, frankly. These studies illustrate that you actually can look at prices, which is not a thing that this study did. It asked for self-reported prices, which is not very useful because you can look up prices on menus online. A study by UC Berkeley actually did that in San Jose. It tracked menu prices for over 100 businesses in and out of San Jose before, during, and after their minimum wage hikes. And it did something really interesting. It got to the border question, because Emeryville is in between two other cities. And so we are basically all a border in terms of what that definition is for these studies, which is a half-mile away from the city of San Jose. What it found is borders had more differentiation in pricing than you would expect. You would think that most of the increases in prices would happen in the center of the city, and people on the border would have to keep their prices lower to effect, and people right over the border would have even lower prices to compete with them. They did not find that to be the case. What they did find was a great amount of price elasticity. Basically, the prices increased to compensate for the minimum wage increase. So higher wage tech workers were basically directly transferring values of wealth onto low wage earners, which was kind of the whole point of this policy in the first place. I also looked at UC Berkeley for probably the largest scale study of any minimum wage ordinance done nationally. It looked at 6 different major cities before, after, and during minimum wage increases, including Oakland, San Francisco, and yes, Seattle. What they found in all 6 cities is that minimum wage increases increased the wealth of low-wage earners and did not cause employment drop-offs. These are good studies for us to be looking at, and this is the kind of data we should be seeking for. I'm not saying that nothing in this study is correct and that what we're hearing from our small local businesses is not valid and that we should not address their concerns, but I do not think we should make drastic policy measures based on really, really bad data when there's much better data available. So I'm going to ask my fellow council members to think very critically about the data that was presented towards us. I personally have thought a lot about how this impacts restaurants and how this will impact workers. And I cannot morally say to somebody who we promised a wage increase months ago that they're not going to get it. They might have planned on having that money to pay for a major expense. They might plan to move somewhere closer to where they work to reduce their commute time. That's something we all up here want, which is why as a council we supported SB 50. Rest in peace. This reflects our values as a city. However, I do think we need to seriously think about impacts on our small restaurants, which are telling us very clearly we've got problems here. So here's what I propose. I think we should look at our business license tax rebate, which fewer than 10 businesses have taken advantage of. That's not good enough. We clearly have not done a good enough job of marketing that. We should look at perhaps expanding rebates or establishing something similar to San Francisco's legacy business program. That in fact offers up to $5,000 a year in employee tax rebate, $500 per full-time employee over a year to offset the cost of their minimum wage increases. If we want to put our money where our mouth is, which we have done time and time again for these ordinances, that's the way we should be looking at it, not taking the money out of the mouths of low-wage workers. Member Pats.
Sorry, that's a lot of information there.
More than was in our original report.
I've read a lot of those same studies, so I really support a lot of what you said. I think that's the way to go. I think I said 2 weeks ago that this data was not reasonable and that a pause was not called for. This was a very thoughtful measure when it first came to council before I was on the council. It was nice to see former council member Atkins speak out in favor of maintaining the coming increase. I do think that it's very hard to run a small business. I do think it's very hard to run a restaurant. The success rate of restaurants is paper thin, and there is a small margin there. That said, I've been a dishwasher, I've been a waiter, and we talk about these as entry-level jobs or transition jobs. And for me, as a white male who's older than dirt, that was very true. But I think the small business owner said it very well. We in Emeryville don't have workers or people who fill those jobs. We're importing them like we do our small business owners. We import them from our surrounding communities because this is where the work is. And so we are bringing people of color, we are bringing women, we are bringing, the back of the house, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one of the few jobs available to people who have been incarcerated, right? So this is who we're talking about when we say, if you're working in a smaller business, your value is aligned with your employment options, which are very limited. Again, I have done those jobs. I have worked in the back of a house. I've worked in the front of a house as well. Not for very long, and that's because I had options. But when I was I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on that. It's problems of working in education as I think about choice a lot. I'm a size 12 shoe, by the way, because apparently that's relevant. And I pay the same to rent my ice skates as Councilmember Bowders does, and his have less leather and less steel. So I just want to share that with you. I think that's a great analogy, but it's not perfect. Final piece. I was thinking about this a lot, and as we differentiate from businesses, one of the things that's a challenge is to find workers in town. And I know this because they don't live here. We're having to import them, and they have to drive in. And they're driving in for the higher wages. And they're going to go to the larger restaurants for that $1 more an hour to do dishwashing. And I've looked online. There's lots of restaurant jobs open. I did that same study. So anyways, I love the idea. Let's get some rebates. Let's take it in a different path, but I think lowering the minimum wage is not the way to go.
Member Donahue.
Some of the notable things from the Mills study, just outlining how the wage has gone up for these businesses. The smaller businesses have an acceleration to meet the 55 or more employee businesses. And the steps they've been taking, like, I guess it was last year, they went $14 to $15. This step, if we don't pause, is a bigger step for them. It's the last step for them meeting the 55 plus. You know, it's a bigger step. I can sense that is, you know, really got them. And I looked at the other minimum wages surrounding us in the surrounding cities. And, you know, we are ahead, but we're not that far ahead. I think that I don't like the way that we're saying to the workers, if we accept this pause, that you're not getting your cost of living increase. I mean, basically, the premise of the entire minimum wage originally was that it was going to be a living wage and there was going to be a cost of living increase. And workers who get the minimum wage need that cost of living increase. So I just can't support the way it is right now without a cost of living increase. I just can't do that. While on the other hand, I'm open to the idea of refashioning this so that our tipped restaurants and, you know, our local restaurants have some break. We can still have at, you know, 15 and the cost of living going up, a little bit higher minimum wage even for this carve out than our surrounding cities. And I think our smaller businesses could survive on that. So I'm open to that in the future, but, you know, studying this further I think is a good idea. I think we ought to look at the total package for what is going to keep these kind of businesses in our town. We don't want to lose an entire category of business, but on the other hand, we don't want to do it on the backs of workers.
Member Martinez.
I'm proud of the work that Member Donahue and I did in 2015 to affect the highest citywide minimum wage in the nation. It wasn't a pretty fight. I'm proud that many other cities in the wake of that decision, and the state of California, I'm not saying it was cause and effect, but it definitely happened that a lot of minimum wages rose in the wake of that action. And when we began that process, we were looking at mirroring what was happening in Oakland at the time. They had just passed a ballot initiative that had raised their wages to $12.25. That's where we began our conversation. And I have to give credit to former Mayor Ruth Atkin for changing that conversation. We started talking about a living wage when she brought that up. And I have to give credit to then council member Jack Asher for illustrating a way to step up with two paths, one for large businesses and one for smaller businesses, because we always talked about protecting small businesses in this process. And I want to acknowledge and thank the community stakeholders who organized and were leaders in many ways during the process, specifically SEIU 10-1. eBase was integral, and Rule was our local home base for support. But I do want to note, at that time in 2015, when we created the highest citywide minimum wage in the nation, our projections did not contemplate an increase in CPI that would bring us north of $16, which is what we're looking at the raise to be on July 1st, $16.30. That's a big step up from $15. It's the biggest increase that these small businesses will have seen since we instituted the minimum wage. I look back on the meetings that we had in 2015, and there was a concerted effort to protect these small businesses. That's why we created two paths. And I want to reiterate that this council has demonstrated its interest in supporting workers over and over again. Our labor standards in this city include not only the minimum wage ordinance, but a fair work week ordinance, paid sick leave, as well as enforcing the wages and conditions for hotel workers via Measure C. Not the Affordable Housing Measure C, the other Measure C. These policies have been the model for other cities looking to lift up the floor and support workers, and they were all passed with a fight. In 2015, we had the Fight for 15 here in Emeryville, and workers won, and I don't take that lightly. But what we're contemplating tonight could mean the difference between workers getting a raise or losing their jobs versus experiencing a pause and keeping small businesses viable. One thing that I've heard from those who think that a pause is a rash action is that we need space to have a real conversation and to investigate the true implications of a wage increase. But unfortunately, we don't have time. We don't have the luxury of time. Putting this pause into action affords us the ability to have that conversation. If we pass this ordinance and its accompanying pause, I'd like to direct staff to start working on a public process so we can bring everyone to the table to establish a wage increase that's both predictable and tenable for our small independent restaurants. Because I agree with the first speaker from public comment, Andrea Malarkey, that all workers deserve the dignity of a living wage. I think that it's always been my intention to join up these two separate tracks for small businesses and large businesses, and we need to get there. And I would not move forward with this process unless I knew that this council was committed to a living wage for all workers in this city, and I believe they are. Finally, I would propose that we expand our definition to include restaurants with 20 or less global locations, which just adds 4 restaurants to the list, and it includes the institution Trader Vic's onto that list. And those are my comments.
Member Bowders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I begin by seconding all of the comments made by Councilmember Martinez. I agree with them in whole. So my comments, I want to first begin by referring back to the study because I also agree with the first speaker, Andrea. I agree with you, Madam Mayor, that the study is flawed, but I want to thank Andrea for saying something I didn't hear anybody else from your side of the issue say, which is you agree that there are impacts on small business. And so I think that the question that is trying to be addressed in this process here is what is the proper way to assess what needs to be done. I recently read a report I found on NPR about will the minimum wage kill jobs? And the answer is no, not necessarily. But what should the wage be is the question. And while I appreciate your study, Madam Mayor, the thing that I did not hear you say or cite was a study on the sustainability of the highest minimum wage in the nation. And that is because there is none. We are in uncharted territory, for sure. And so, to Councilmember Martinez's earlier comment, how do we continue to lift up workers, and what is a sustainable process, a sustainable wage, and a sustainable way forward for this community to balance the needs of workers and to lift people out of poverty, and at the same time, respect the culture and institutions in the small business community that make this a livable and desirable place to live and work. I believe that small business owners are workers. I believe that small business owners are often low-wage workers. I reject the comment made by one member of the public that in the absence of taking the time to carefully examine this, Emeryville would become a locus of suffering. I reject it because we have one of the best family paid leave ordinances you can get in California. We are one of only a couple cities that has a fair work week and a fair scheduling ordinance that protects workers' ability to take care of their children, obtain an education, succeed in other employment, and grow with their family. We have a very just landlord-tenant protection ordinance. We have a just cause eviction ordinance that protects low-income renters from displacement and gentrification. This council and the city of Emeryville passed a $50 million affordable housing bond to build affordable rental apartments to working people. We tax our residents and our businesses to pay for the Emery-Go-Round to provide free transit to take people to and from their jobs, regional transit, and appointments in our community. We require in our development guidelines that transit passes be available to people in new apartment buildings. We do a lot of things. Coming back to my comments from the prior meeting, a wage alone is not going to justly lift people out of poverty. All of these policies are necessary to create a more just space for working and low-income people. To the comments in the letter we received from the group of labor organizations, I have a couple responses. No, this is not rushed. The city of Emeryville put this on the agenda on May 7th. The city council did not request the timing of that. We did not ask for it to be specifically agended at that time. And the recommendation to have this conversation and to decide whether or not to make a thoughtful review for a very limited, narrow group of businesses impacted by our minimum wage ordinance necessitates asking yourself whether it makes any sense to have that evaluation now or later. And for me, the importance of having that conversation is now. I don't believe that putting a pause on this for a limited segment of the business community comes at a grave cost to the people we are lifting out with the wage. There's concern that there would be other carve-outs or exceptions, and I know Councilmember Martinez shares the perspective I have, which is that the Budget Committee, which she and I constitute, have neither recommended nor would we ask for any review beyond the narrow scope of small independent food service establishments as we have discussed here today. Lastly, I want to talk about the impacts that this policy has on the broader economy in Emeryville. Hotels in the city of Emeryville refer guests and visitors to sit-down restaurants where people dine. We are in competition with Oakland and Berkeley to bring that hotel revenue here. Those hotel workers make a living wage, and they are union employees. That is the second highest grossing source of revenue for the city. Sales tax is the highest grossing source of revenue for the city, and retail consumers in the modern retail and consumer economy, young people, come to shopping centers, and we have 4, to have an experience with their peers. This is centered around eating. Our retail jobs, which we're not proposing to stop the minimum wage increase for, are susceptible to changes in the restaurant climate at retail centers. There's a level of intricacy to the economy, and I think Jake spoke most appropriately to it. How we attract businesses, how we sustain our local economy, depends on even some of the most minor or small elements of it. Unique spaces and unique land uses exist tied to these restaurants. If the townhouse were to close, what would it reopen as? Most likely a condominium. If Trader Vic's were to close, would BCDC ever permit another use on that site? Not likely. Will anyone rent a 30,000 square foot tiki restaurant on the peninsula? Probably not. We had a presentation earlier this evening, and I would like just briefly to put this on the screen, if I could. Earlier this evening, the City Council held a special meeting to discuss its budget. There's one slide in that presentation I want to share with the public who weren't here for that. This is the general fund long-term forecast for our city. The dotted green line represents the variation, the solid green line represents revenues, and the solid red line represents anticipated expenditures. The dotted green line represents a 1% year-over-year variation from the forecasted revenues of the city, both positive and negative. If we are not careful about how we balance all the segments of our economy, the growth of the debt that would exist between our estimated revenues and our anticipated expenditures could potentially grow dramatically. So this begs the question, what are we going to do to address that in the event that we are wrong? If we move forward with the increase that's proposed for the food sector of independent businesses on July 1st, something that hasn't been done at that level anywhere in this country, and we are wrong, and it is not sustainable, and people do lose their jobs, what does the City Council propose to do to overcome this difference? Will it mean the loss of city services to residents? Will it mean the loss of good union jobs here for employees in the city? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's something that is on my mind when I think about this issue. With that, Madam Mayor, the only other thing I wish to say is that I think the study can be done better, and I think if we were to take a path forward tonight, my request would be similar to Councilmember Martinez, that we pause this wage increase for a small segment of the population. We immediately begin the conversation and the study that's needed and create the space and time that's been requested by the stakeholders to have a thorough discussion about how to appropriately track cost of living issues for workers going forward. But we do that after July 1st.
Thank you. I'd like to respond to a couple of the comments here, and it's something that actually just came up to me. In 2015, members Donahue and Martinez voted for this rate, but not the specific amounts of this increase. In 2016, I ran for office here in Emeryville, as did the two members to either of my sides, and all three of us were asked a lot about our stance on the minimum wage. That was a hot topic in that election. I consistently, to people at the door, to every town hall or forum I was in, said I supported it, and I won, as did Member Pats, I believe, and Member Bowders. This is an issue that I ran on, and an issue that Emeryville voters chose to select the candidates that supported the minimum wage, and I think that's an important point here. The people in this community have chosen to support these measures. A couple things that were raised here about, the concerns of our retail environment being affected by this. The reason Pasta Pomodoro shut down is because Pasta Pomodoro chains all across the nation shut down. It was an aging business that no longer fit the current retail model. The reason there's not a New Seasons market is because their first expansion out of Oregon was into Sunnyvale, which was a mismatched market. They overexpanded and decided to pull entirely out of California. Had nothing to do with the current environment in Emeryville. So I think there's been some fear that's being raised by unrelated issues. And also, when teens and millennials are out shopping, we like to slam juices. Those are not sit-down restaurants. Or kombucha, whatever, it's on draft now. Nitro cold brew, another hot one for us. Avocado toast, you don't need a cloth table for that. If we're talking about these trends, there's no study out there, again, that says that long-term debts will be increased in cities that raise the minimum wage. That's not a thing that exists. There's no data for that. So I think if we are looking at the information that we do have, we have come out in front of the nation before on our minimum wage. The economy didn't explode. There's nothing telling us it's going to happen this time. And so I do think we need to be very responsive to our small business community, particularly those restaurants telling us they're having a really hard time right now. I hear you, I understand you. I've been looking at what San Francisco has been doing to keep long-term restaurants. I am supportive of immediately acting to look at some rebates or issue some sort of tax incentive we can have to keep you here. But again, not interested in altering our minimum wage. This is an issue I ran on, and I think representative of Emeryville values and something I intend to continue to support. So I've got no motion here tonight. Vice Mayor Pats?
I just want to go back to something Member Martinez said about not imagining it going over 16%, or $16 an hour, apologies. And, it's about a 35% increase from where it was before the ordinance was passed until next year, which mirrors the rent increases in retail space. Has been about 35%. And the reason that it's going past $16 an hour is because, and you cited Jack Asher, she tied it, or you guys tied it to the Consumer Price Index. We didn't foresee the economy going this way. The wage is not tied to a non-factor. It's tied to an actual metric that says these costs have gone up. To me, that's incredible, and I go back to what Mayor Medina just said. A 35% increase in your rents and a 35% increase in your labor costs. I hear that. That's incredible, and I want to explore those things. And so I'm going to ask that we agendize that for our next meeting to start having that conversation, because we need to start figuring out how to support those things. But, you know, landlords got 35%. That drove up the CPI. That's translating down to the wage. You know, we have some of the highest rents in the area. And I want to reiterate, we keep calling this a living wage. $16.35 an hour equates to $34,000 a year working full-time. And I challenge you to live on that in the Bay Area. And so that's my thought on that.
Member Donahue?
Well, when we started, we had a carve-out, meaning less than 55 employees. And our goal was to bring up the small businesses. That's where we are now. Our carve-out could be very small, what we've suggested tonight. So I'm open to having a carve-out, but not at without a cost of living increase for that group. In other words, $15 plus cost of living going forward. I can't imagine pausing for 15. You know, it could just sit there, and you know this. So as the proposal is now, I can't vote for it, but I'm open to discussing this segment of our economy, which truly the labor standards people said this was the most challenging part of the labor segment. You know, I think it is right to be concerned about this business section of our economy. And if we did 15 plus cost of living going forward, we'd be just ahead of our surrounding businesses. We'd be competitive though, whereas, you know, if we're jumping up like this, it's a big shock to some of these businesses we don't want to lose. You know, I'm just saying we could do that, but I just can't go forward with a pause at 15.
Member Martinez?
So, Scott, I wholeheartedly agree with you that, in terms of the fact that our lowest paid workers need a raise, but I want to create a thoughtful environment and studies that actually reflect what the actual conditions are for workers and create that space for that conversation rather than us trying to make policy on an arc tonight, because I think that gets us into a very sticky place. What are we making these decisions based upon? I'm looking for a plan for these two wages to meet up again. There should only be one wage. Every employee in Emeryville deserves a living wage, and I want to get there. And I put the onus on all of us to have that real conversation. So I really, while I don't like this pause, I think this is the tool that we need to get us to have this conversation. So I think you know these people up here that you're sitting next to, and none of us would leave this wage at $15 an hour for any important part of time. And I also just want to reiterate what staff reported with this, that this $16.30 wage was not publicized until the week of April 15th. And with that, I'd like to move to read by title only.
Second.
Call the roll.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
No.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
No.
Mayor Medina?
No.
So you can listen to the ordinance then.
I read the ordinance.
So this,
Yes.
You realize this is
just to read by
The
title.
whole thing, Scott.
Yep. All right, here we go. An ordinance of the City of an ordinance of the City of Emeryville amending sections 5-37.01 and 5-37.02 of Chapter 37 of Title V of the City of Emeryville Municipal Code with respect to the minimum wage for employees of small independent restaurants. Whereas on June 2nd, 2015, the Emeryville City Council adopted ordinance number 15004, the minimum wage, paid sick leave, and other employment standards ordinance, codified at Chapter 37 of Title V of the Emeryville Municipal Code, the minimum wage ordinance. And whereas on May 7, 2019, the City Council received a report on business conditions related to implementation of the city's labor standards ordinances, including the minimum wage ordinance, the report. And whereas the minimum wage ordinance includes a scheduled increase in the minimum wage for all businesses to $16.30 per hour on July 1, 2019, and whereas following the presentation and discussion of the report, the City Council directed staff to draft an amendment to the minimum wage ordinance to provide that the minimum wage for employees of small independent restaurants would remain at $15 per hour as of July 1, 2019, because according to the report, these businesses have been the most impacted by the minimum wage ordinance, and whereas the definition of small independent restaurant set forth below is narrowly tailored to achieve the city's interest in encouraging the continued viability of small independent eating and drinking establishments and their contribution to the broader economy of Emeryville. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Emeryville hereby ordains as follows. Section 1, recitals and findings. The above recitals and findings are true and correct, are material to the adoption of this ordinance, and are incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, amending Section 5-37.01 of Chapter 37 of Title V of the City of Emeryville Municipal Code. Section 5-37.01 of the City of Emeryville Municipal Code, definitions, is hereby amended as follows. Additions are in double underlined text. Those portions not specifically amended remain unchanged. 5-37.01, definitions. As used in this chapter, the following term shall have the following meanings. Sub A, calendar week shall mean a period of 7 consecutive days starting on Sunday. Sub B, city shall mean the City of Emeryville. Sub C, employee shall mean any person who, 1, in a calendar week performs at least 2 hours of work within the geographic boundaries of the city for an employer, and 2, qualifies as an employee entitled to payment of a minimum wage from any employer under the California minimum wage law as provided under Section 1197 of the California Labor Code and wage orders published by the California Industrial Welfare Commission. Employees shall include learners as defined by the California Industrial Welfare Commission. Sub D, employer shall mean any person, including a natural person, corporation, nonprofit corporation, general partnership, limited liability partnership, limited liability company, business trust, estate trust, association, joint venture, agency, instrumentality, or any other legal or commercial entity, whether domestic or foreign, who directly or indirectly, including through the services of a temporary services or staffing agency or similar entity, employs or exercises control over the wages, hours, or working conditions of any employee. Sub E, paid sick leave shall mean paid sick leave as defined in California Labor Code, Section 233, Sub B4, except that the definition here extends beyond the employee's own illness, injury, medical condition, need for medical diagnosis or treatment, or medical reason to also encompass time taken off work by an employee for the purpose of providing care or assistance to other persons specified below with an illness, injury, medical condition, or need for medical diagnosis or treatment. Sub F, minimum wage shall have the meaning set forth in Section 5-37.02. Sub G, small business shall mean an employer for which normally 55 or fewer employees work for compensation during a given week. In determining the number of employees performing work for an employer during a given week, all employees performing work for the employer for compensation on a full-time, part-time, or temporary basis shall be counted, including employees made available to work through the services of a temporary services or staffing agency or similar entity. Sub H, small independent restaurant shall mean an employer that is a small business, meeting the definition of a restaurant pursuant to Section 9-2.319, Sub B, and that has 12 or fewer locations globally. For purposes of this definition, small independent restaurant shall exclude any franchisee associated with franchisor or a network of franchises with franchisees that has more than 12 locations globally. Section 3, amending Section 5-37.02, minimum wage of Chapter 37 of Title V of the Emeryville Municipal Code. Section 5-37.02 of the City of Emeryville Municipal Code, entitled Minimum Wage, is hereby amended as follows. Additions are in double underlined text. Those portions not specifically amended remain unchanged. Section 5-37.02, Minimum Wage. Sub A, employers shall pay employees no less than the minimum wage for each hour worked within the geographic boundaries of the city. Sub B, beginning on July 2nd, 2015, the minimum wage paid by employers which are not small businesses shall be an hourly rate of $14.44 to prevent inflation from eroding its value beginning on July 1, 2016, and then each year thereafter on July 1. The minimum wage shall increase by an amount corresponding to the prior calendar year's increase, if any, in the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers for the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, California metropolitan statistical area, or if such index is discontinued, then in the most similar successor index. Sub C, for employers which are small businesses, the minimum wage rate shall be as follows. 1, beginning July 2, 2nd, 2015, the minimum wage shall be an hourly rate of $12.25 per hour. 2, beginning July 1, 2016, the minimum wage shall be an hourly rate of $13 per hour. 3, beginning July 1, 2017, the minimum wage shall be an hourly rate of $14 per hour. 4, beginning July 1, 2018, the minimum wage shall be an hourly rate of $15 per hour. 5, beginning July 1, 2019, the minimum wage for employers which are small businesses but not small independent restaurants shall be the then current minimum wage for employers which are not small businesses. To prevent inflation from eroding its value, beginning on July 1, 2020, and then each year thereafter on July 1, the minimum wage shall increase by an amount corresponding to the prior calendar year's increase, if any, in the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers of the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, California metropolitan statistical area, or if such index is discontinued, then in the most similar successor index. 6, beginning July 1, 2019, the minimum wage for employers which are small independent restaurants shall be an hourly rate of $15 per hour. Sub D, an employee who is a learner as defined by the California Industrial Welfare Commission shall be paid no less than 85% of the applicable minimum wage provided in this chapter for the first 160 hours of employment. Thereafter, the employee shall be paid the applicable minimum wage rate provided in this chapter. Sub E, consistent with state law, an employer may not deduct any amount from wages due an employee on account of any tip or gratuity or credit the amount of any part thereof of a tip or gratuity against and as part of the wages due the employee from the employer. Further, the value of any employer-provided benefits, including health care benefits, shall not be deducted or credited against wages due an employee. Thanks. Section 4, CEQA determination. The City Council finds and determines that this ordinance is exempt from environmental review under state CEQA guidelines, section 15324, which applies to regulations of working conditions, including employee wages, and the general rule at section 15061 sub B3, because it could be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the proposal may have significant effect on the environment. Section 5, severability. Each section, paragraph, clause, and phrase of this ordinance is hereby declared severable if for any reason any section, paragraph, clause, or phrase is held to be invalid or unconstitutional. Such invalidity or unconstitutionality shall not affect the validity or constitutionality of the remaining sections, paragraphs, clauses, or phrases. Section 6, codification. Sections 2 and 3 of this ordinance shall be codified in the Emeryville Municipal Code. Sections 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7 shall not be codified. Section 7, effective date and posting. This ordinance shall take effect 30 days following its final passage. The city clerk is directed to cause copies of this ordinance to be posted or published as required by Government Code Section 33693. This ordinance was introduced and first read by the City Council of the City of Emeryville at a regular meeting held Tuesday, May 21, 2019, and passed and adopted by the City Council at a regular meeting held Wednesday, May 29, 2019, by the following votes. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move the ordinance with the amendment at section 5-37.01 sub H, changing the reference to 12 locations to 20 or fewer locations globally.
Call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
No.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
No.
And Mayor Medina?
No.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask staff if they have alternative language I asked to have drafted available, please.
The answer is yes. Yeah, I was going to say. Here you go. Yes, to the concern about escalation, and about freezing the minimum wage at small independent, for small independent restaurants without dealing with any increases going forward. We spent some time thinking about this and determined that one way you can get around that is, and allow these wages to converge, is to express the minimum wage after July 1st, 2019 as a percentage of the wage for all of the businesses. At $15, it's approximately 92% of $16.30. And so by escalating the small independent restaurant minimum wage by 1 percentage point every year starting in 2020, you would converge in 2027. So this language achieves that objective.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The issue that I had with the escalation from $15 to $16.30, as Councilmember Martinez noted, the original discussion in 2015 was anticipating a much lower CPI, and this would accomplish an annual increase for all employees, but it would extend the wage increase for the merging out to 2027, which would give small businesses a longer ramp-up time to be able to come in compliance. I will note that in 2023, the state's small business won't even reach $15 in 2023, and so we will have exceeded it at 2023 as well as written. That's the number one. Yep, we got it.
Are the correct numbers? The words are wrong.
Oh, you're changing it to all match the numbers, I understand.
Yeah.
So,
A little typo.
that's okay. With that, Madam Mayor, I move to read by title only the proposed ordinance.
Second. Sorry, I had to catch up with my reading.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Could I ask a question? Is it too late?
It's by title.
Just to read by title only, Scott.
A title
Unless you want to
only is
reread
fine,
the whole thing
yes.
again.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina?
Aye.
An ordinance of the City of Emeryville amending sections 5-37.01 and 5-37.02 of Chapter 37 of Title 5 of the City of Emeryville Municipal Code with respect to the minimum wage for employees of small independent restaurants.
You had a question, Scott?
Well, just with this,
Please use the microphone.
with this concept, cost of living would apply to the carve-out, isn't that correct?
It would increase until they were all the same wage in
Yes,
2027.
so everything else would be the same.
It just
other
would be
than that.
a smaller cost of living increase than is currently scheduled. It would be adjusting it down, but it would extend the timeline, it would ultimately merge.
Well, it's merging, but more importantly, is $15 plus the current, I mean, would it be,
It's, so at 15, so the way it's read, it's $15 today, so next year it has to be 93% of the wage paid by the non-small businesses, which means it will have to go up because it's pegged to the larger wage, which will automatically go up. So it will go up based on a percentage of the cost of living, but it will be
okay,
smaller.
yeah, now I can see how that would, yeah, okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance.
Second.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Before we
Yeah.
finish that, just some clarification. As amended
As amended with the numbers being
by the
correct.
staff,
And I'm sorry, to clarify, as amended with the
And with the amendment to H,
20.
to change 20.
thank you.
Yes, so it's a motion to approve this with the corrections that staff have written, so the numbers match the digits on there, and then to include Councilmember Martinez's earlier section, which was 5-37.01 sub H, to change 12 to 20. That's my motion.
Second.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
No.
And Mayor Medina.
No. Motion passes. All right, next up, 12.3, resolution of the City of the Council of
Madam Mayor, before we close this item, I don't want to close the door on studies that include how the workers are doing in Emeryville. So I just want to say, you know, if staff is planning on having Mills work on any future studies, I want to make sure that we're talking to workers as well. I don't even know who I'm talking to. Did anyone hear me?
That we can have, what the policy
Charlie.
is.
Thank you.
I'm listening.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I just want
Member
to
Pats.
quickly address the people who are packing up to leave. We are about to schedule a second reading of this ordinance. So this was just the first reading. I want to remind the audience of that this is not yet passed.
All right, resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville amending to the 2019 City Council regular meeting schedule. Do we have a staff report on this? No, just.
It was just to provide the opportunity for the second reading of the ordinance that you just did the introduction of, and to make it a regular meeting. So that would be the only item on the agenda for that meeting, should you decide to add that to your regular meeting schedule.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll open it up for discussion. Yes, Member Martinez?
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
And so to clarify, this resolution will put it on the 29th?
21st.
21st.
29th.
We're at the 21st right now. 29th at what time?
7:16.
7:16. And further clarify, one of our members cannot make it for that. Is that correct?
I could make it via televised solution. I could make it with a posting of where I'm staying in the East Coast.
Teleconference?
Yes.
So we would need to get that location, and the city clerk would need to prepare that language for posting.
Okay.
So you're on the East Coast, so that'll be 10:16 your time.
Yes.
Okay. It is my brother's graduation that day from high school, but made a commitment to the voters of Emeryville that I'd show up for meetings, so tough luck, kiddo. All right, let's go for it.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
No.
And Mayor Medina.
No. All right. Next up, 12.4, presentation and discussion on legislative priorities.
I was worried about you for a minute there. I'm glad to see you're okay. Fully recovered.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Nicolo DeLuca, Townsend Public Affairs. This is an update from a previous presentation on state legislation. Quick backdrop, going through some major deadlines right now in Sacramento.
Could we please have other conversations outside of the chamber? Thank you.
This map has nothing to do with my presentation.
Oh yeah, the map is not part of his presentation as well.
But it's a nice map.
Beautiful. You can turn off the light though.
that?
I'll take care of it.
All right, you got tech support up there.
So last week, one major deadline, the Appropriations Committee, as some of you know, that's where bills get put on hold. Then the next 2 weeks, bills have to get off their first, have to get off the floor of their first house. Sorry, I'm a little tired. So 2 charts, and I did a cover memo. One chart was bills that the city has taken past positions on. Another chart was bills that we are watching closely on behalf of the city, which hopefully after some discussion you will give me direction to either keep watching or support or oppose. I can probably after the council meeting update this just because of time of printing. Some of the items were still alive, which actually now some of them have changed. So with that, out of respect to you have an agenda and other items to discuss, let me know if you want to ask questions and I'll address them or how you'd like to go forward.
Okay. Do you have any clarifying questions? All right, go forward.
All right, so on the watch list, there's a couple I'm just going to highlight. There are this is essentially the year of housing. There are a lot of bills that seek to address housing. As you know, the city took a position in SB 50. That's on hold for right now, though, as we know, the author is very tenacious, and we expect it to come back in one form or fashion. The bills I do want to highlight are moving down the road, and we're going to be looking at AB 1486. That's on page 4 out of 7, from Assemblymember Ting on surplus land. AB 1486, AB 1487 from Assemblymember Chu, which is what's being referred to as a regional housing entity bill. And then that is pretty much it for now. Happy to answer any questions. Councilmember Martinez, I need to make sure AB 1046 is on the watch list, and actually probably now should move that probably to the support list. And then Councilmember Bowders, SB 531 Glazer is his sales tax bill from last year, which, defer to how you all want to handle this. It's changing basically if you have existing agreements, once those term out, no more and no new ones. It is being opposed by Fresno, City of Paris, and the California Retailers Association, support by the League, the California Labor Fed Association, and other groups. So I just wanted to flag that one too. So with that, happy to discuss specific bills, and I know there's a few on scooter sharing and bicycle sharing.
Yeah, if you could give us an update on those two that we'd asked for.
Absolutely. AB 1112, Assemblywoman Friedman. This is a bill that's been amended a lot, I think 4 times. Cities have identified it with initially some concerns, and there still are some concerns. The point is initially to address how motorized scooters are regulated. This bill has changed a couple of times. There's been some pushback from, I know Los Angeles and San Francisco had some concerns. If you all can tell me a little bit more about what your ordinance does, but I think on this one, I'm going to recommend actually an opposed position due to some of the throwaway language at the very, very bottom that talks about cost of service, and I think it would impact your ordinance on low-income folks.
If I can answer that up here. Yeah, our ordinance does, for our shared mobility device ordinance, would in fact require a low-income program. It also has requirements around parking. We read in the bill that the bill would preclude local ordinances from having any requirements of shared mobility device companies that individuals don't have. And so my concern was that that would not only tank our low-income program, but also open us up to discussion of whether or not we can have parking requirements that individuals don't have. Like, if we don't make individuals take pictures of their scooters when they park them, can we enforce that on companies?
Madam Mayor, since this isn't, the language isn't before the council or the public, if I could just read that section.
Oh, that'd be great.
I think
Thanks.
it might be helpful. So the legislation as amended in section 39058, the amended version, I think I have the right one. In regulating shared mobility devices and providers, a local authority shall not impose any unduly restrictive requirement on a provider, including requiring operation below cost, and shall not subject the riders of shared mobility devices to requirements more restrictive than those applicable to riders of personally owned similar transportation devices, including but not limited to personally owned bicycles and electric bicycles and electric scooters. So that would potentially gut large portions of our dockless shared mobility system ordinance.
Which we did just spend a lot of time on.
And what I would like to do when we draft, if it's the direction of the council to draft our letter, would just highlight that specific section of why we have our concerns.
That'd be great. And then there was AB 1112.
That was 1112,
that
and
was
if
it.
you want to talk a little bit, I know you know about the
The indemnity one.
Assemblymember Santiago's bill on that.
What's the link, the number on it?
1 second. As I looked that up, if you want to talk about some of the other bills, happy to do so. I think the regional entity bill 1487 has raised some discussion. I do want to say I was in a meeting yesterday with Assemblymember Chu, very open to feedback from all, specifically on what their regional entity could look like. There has been some discussion, so to all 5 of you, the proposal essentially is to create a entity of the 9 Bay Area counties to collect revenue, and the bill outlines about 10 different types of revenue. One thought is this could be backfilling RDA money, and the point would be all this money is to build affordable housing. So I think obviously the need for a new funding source to kind of backfill RDA is very important to the city of Emeryville. I know to other cities in the Bay Area there's a greater focus on hitting your RENA numbers, so that's very enticing. The concerns are what the regional entity could look like. That's been changed a couple of different times, and the Assembly member said he's very open to suggestions and feedback. And then I know for cities such as Emeryville, one of the items everything would go to the voters in 2020. One item could be a sales tax increase, knowing that you all have some thoughts on what you do locally for potential sales tax. That Assembly member in the past has said maybe that's something to remove. On Monday he said maybe that's something to keep in, but that's definitely still on the table.
Any other bills? I think the other one oh yeah, go ahead.
I have 2 that I wanted to ask about. I wanted to ask about Assembly Bill 618, but I think there's an alternative bill to that we should be looking at, because that bill is a use tax. Does that include sales taxes? I don't know if it does.
As I understand the way that it does, so Alameda County, you guys are capped out on your sales tax. You need state legislation to increase the cap. AB 618 is from Assembly Member Stone. He's got it for, I think it's like Warm Springs.
Scotts Valley.
Yeah, Scotts Valley down in his district. Last year around this time, we were talking about a potential increase because Berkeley was doing something. So if that is something that you all would be interested in exploring, a couple options would be talking to the author's office to see if we could be amended into it. If not, I might be aware of another bill that could possibly change that we might be able to.
So after we've taken public comment, I'll have a request of council related to that, because it's tied to the next agenda item. My only other bill that I wanted to ask about was Senate Bill 742 by Senator Allen, which dealt with the Capital Corridor bus service. So the bill would authorize Capital Corridor to essentially sell Trans-Bay tickets between Emeryville and San Francisco without requiring a linked ticket to ride the train. Right now you can only buy the bus pass if you have the train. And there is a need to improve Trans-Bay bus service between the Emeryville San Francisco Bay Amtrak station and the Trans-Bay terminal. In our regular ongoing meetings with AC Transit, they've expressed interest, but there are some barriers to them doing it, mostly related to they don't have buses that have luggage compartments in them. That's a big issue for them, and they don't have staff that can service the movement of luggage. So, but their union will very much want the opportunity to bid or compete for that. So after public comment, I'm going to ask if council would be interested in a support, if amended, to require a right of first refusal to a local transit agency and their union before such service could begin.
One question. Yeah. Nicola, could you tell us, when are we going to find out the true status of SB 50? Do we have to wait till next session to figure out if it's going to be a 2-year bill?
That's a great question. I mean, technically, the way that it left the Senate Appropriations Committee last Thursday was 2-year bill could be heard as early as it could be heard in January. However, there's a lot of discussions afoot as to what does that really look like? Are there other alternatives? Are there other opportunities? I would say
opportunities to make it happen sooner?
Potentially, yes. I would say we'll have a better understanding probably the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
And the author's office, they're aware of how the city's supportive, and they're very easy to, great communication.
Okay.
Some member Bowders with regards to SB 724.
Elected to the assembly, wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Council member. SB 724, I spoke to Senator Allen's office about this, saying, hey, we flagged it. They're like, keep us posted. Senator Allen is a rail warrior. We want to be as helpful as possible.
Okay.
Rail warrior was their term, not mine.
Oh, God. The other scooter, the one that I had flagged was 1286 Meritsuchi.
Yes.
And it puts in particular insurance coverage requirements My concern was that might conflict or supersede our indemnity clause. And so I just wanted to have us watch this bill because as the other one got repeatedly amended with new and interesting things, this could happen here. So that was the other one. Any other questions? Yeah. All right, we're going to take a second for a public comment on this item, and then we'll resume with a more robust discussion, if we have any. Any public comment on this topic? Nobody else finds shared mobility ordinances super fascinating? Just me. Okay, thanks, guys. All right, so we can give more specific direction now. John, I think you had something.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want them as separate motions. Is that easier, or do you want a collected motion? Staff? Is it easier?
Depends on how many you're going to make.
Well, I have 2 items, but I know the mayor has a couple items, I think, for positions. And so if it's easier for me to just jot down what everyone wants, I'll make one motion then. Is that fine with everyone?
Sure.
People
Yeah.
need
As
that.
long
If
as it's
people
clear.
don't like one of the proposed things, I just want to make sure people can vote for what they want and not vote for what they don't want, right?
You could just pull it out separately if you do that.
Okay, so my request would be first to take a support if amended position for SB 742 by Allen to require the right of first refusal to a local transit agency to take on the service before the service can begin. And my second item would be, rather than designating a specific bill, I would ask that the city of Emeryville seek to be added to a piece of existing legislation that would give the city of Emeryville the capacity to expand the sales tax beyond the existing cap by a quarter cent.
I would like to add on that we oppose AB 1112, which I think would preclude our scooter ordinance, and that we watch AB 1286.
Are there other items? So if I'll make a motion to support, if amended, to require the right of first refusal to a local transit agency for SB 742 to take a position of opposed to AB 1112, to take a position of watch on AB 1286, and to give staff and Townsend and Public Affairs direction to have Emeryville join to an existing piece of legislation to increase our sales tax cap by 1/4 cent.
I'll second.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Next up, 12.5, consideration of potential revenue measures for 2020.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a general report that was presented to the Budget and Governance Committee a couple weeks ago, providing timelines for both the March 2020 primary and the November 2020 general election for any possible ballot measure the council might be interested in. The Budget and Governance Committee asked that we move this item forward to the full council for your discussion. I can give you a brief overview of those timelines, both with regard to the legislative calendar, but also what it would take to develop a measure, because obviously that needs to start earlier. For the March 2020 primary, the last day to call that election would be 88 days prior. So the last council meeting to call that election would be December 3rd of this year, December 3rd, 2019. And then the deadlines all follow that. The rebuttals, so that all gets very crunched before the holiday season. So the rebuttal arguments, which is the last series of arguments, would be due December 20th. Early voting for that election begins February 3rd, and the last day to request a vote by mail ballot is February 25th. Election day is March 3rd. So that's again the March 2020 primary. So if the council was interested in developing a ballot measure or measures for that election, staff would recommend that we would start that process next month by issuing an RFP for a community engagement consultant. We would come back to you the last meeting in July to award a contract, assuming that the cost of that would exceed $45,000. We would also at the time ask you to identify areas of focus for a community survey, aka a poll, We would then work on that with the selected consultant in August. The consultant would perform the survey in September and bring the results back to you at your October 1st meeting. We would ask you to determine your ballot measure topics October 15th, and then the city council would have the opportunity to call the election on your November 19th meeting. And again, just a reminder, the last day would be the December 3rd council meeting. So that's sort of the fastest possible approach to the March 2020 ballot. Shifting to the November 2020 general election, so the council meeting at which you would call that election a little bit prior to the 88 days. The 88 days is like the first or second week of August, but your last council meeting would be July 21st of 2020 if you didn't set a special council meeting. So assuming you went with your regular calendar, you'd call that election on July 21st. The deadline to file the rebuttal arguments on that one would be August 21st, and then early voting begins October 5th. Last day to request vote by mail ballot is October 27th. The general election is November 3rd. For that one, we would recommend starting probably in November with an RFP. So that would give you some time in the fall to have several study sessions around how to narrow your focus for that initial poll. We would do an RFP in November, select the consultant, and then have probably the first, if you wanted to do 2 polls, the first poll would be February timeline with a report back in March. That would give the opportunity to refine the question, have a second poll in April, report back in May, refine the question or questions. You could have those done by late June, and then you would call the election and do the arguments in July. So time difference being for the March primary, we start next month. For the general election in November, we would basically start in October. Happy to answer any questions about process and happy to take any notes about content.
Any clarifying questions? Okay. Seeing none, should we do public comment and then this? All right, public comment on this item. Quieter public. Yeah, there you go.
I'm glad the itinerary was laid out, because I know that your committee and the Budget Advisory Committee will be interested in seeing if appropriate revenue measures are put on the appropriate balance quickly and efficiently. This is a problem we face down the road, as you know. Expenditures go up, revenue stalls, and we have to face that as we go ahead. So good work from the city manager and the staff.
Okay. See no other public comment. I'll open this up for discussion. Would love to hear from our joint committee over here that's been working diligently on this.
Yes, Madam Mayor, before Mr. Reuter and Ms. Major leave, I would like to, well, she's just going to stay warm, I think.
Yeah, it's freezing.
So I passed these down this way, and staff, if you could put this on the overhead, this is the, you have yours, right?
I have mine.
This is the discussion that the Budget Governance Committee had, so we wanted to put it in writing and give it to the rest of the council. We do have a proposal for a ballot measure to do revenue. So I'll just go over what's on here real quick. We're not asking for anyone to necessarily vote to do this today, obviously. We're simply putting it into the public space beyond the scope of our committee, which is why we asked for a ballot agenda item. So we looked at what were the things in the city's budget when we did the budget study that were in need of additional funding, and Councilmember Martinez and I had conversations, as I mentioned, at ex parte communications with various stakeholders in the community about what were the priorities, what are the gaps, what are the things that need to be filled. We examined what are the possible revenue streams. So there aren't a lot of really good options to kind of bunch all the things we need together, but this is the best. We think this is a really good thing to propose and to discuss, and the stakeholders have so far all been very positive about this. So it's a 1/4-cent sales tax levy. It would require us to get an extension from the cap, which is what we just discussed in the prior item. It would yield approximately $2.1 million of new annual revenue a year to the city. The things that would be directly funded, we proposed adding 2 shifts to 1 engine at 1 station for Local 55. The shifts would be assigned by the highest call for service volume. You see I've put the estimated costs annually in there as we go along. We've had 2 bicycle positions at the police station that need to be filled. This figure assumes a 6% incentive pay for education and other experience. We've been sorely missing a code enforcement officer. It's been a priority for the city council, and it would provide some capacity within the planning department to do other things. So we have 1 full-time code enforcement officer for the planning department. We also have 1 full-time assistant engineer to the public works department, which would allow us to have a person dedicated to working on the CIP. If you have those come out of the estimated revenue, you have a new balance of roughly $755,000. One of the things that we wanted to make sustainable that we talked about at our last budget was ensuring that ECDC was a sustainable and predictable program for the community and not subject to future challenges for funding or staffing. And so in order to both help the budget and ECDC, this proposal would cap the general fund contribution for ECDC at $1 million, not statistically, like we can't spend more than $1 million, but essentially the way it would be written would that we would take the next portion of revenue after those first 4 items, and we would use it to cover the difference in any subsidy needed above $1 million. And so if you look at those 4 figures there, in the next budget year, the cost of ECDC to the city is expected at $1,033,000. So we would take $33,000 in the first year. It's going to go to $1,104,000 the second year. So we would continue to take money from that 755 figure to cover ECDC, but it would help make ECDC a $1 million general fund figure annually. And then finally, there will be some balance, right? So in the early years, there'll be a little more balance left over than once you get out to about years 8 or 9. There's essentially we're filled in that point in capacity. But we would allow for the council to make appropriations of the balance of the funds into a sub-account to provide for future contributions of ECDC, so to extend the lifespan of that budget principle to keep the cap at $1 million, to allocate certain amount of unassigned funds into the CIP at a discretionary basis. So we've taken money to help cover Horton Landing Park and the Bayfront Bridge from that unassigned category. We should put some more money there to cover large projects like that again in the future. And we're about $1.4 million short of our goal for $5 million on the disaster fund. And so some of this money could be used to help close that gap, and we could close that out as a goal. This measure would only require a simple majority because it's a specific, and it's a use tax. It's got a specific purpose. Benefit is it would be paid mostly by visitors to Emeryville instead of residents. I generally disfavor sales taxes because they are regressive. That is, I'm very cognizant of that, and I know that none of us up here generally like that or prefer that, but I think that with other measures that the school district and the county might be doing, this might be the way to go. This would allow us to increase incrementally across the board the core city services that are needed to meet growing demands for public safety, public works, planning and code enforcement, while also helping stabilize our city budget around the child care center. And it would protect our funding policies in the commercial transfer tax space, which keeps us on track for unfunded liabilities into the next 7 or 8 years, hopefully. So not something I whipped up at lunch today, obviously, but I really appreciated the feedback Councilmember Martinez has given on this and our work on this together. And obviously it's subject to all 5 of us wanting to do something like this or talk about this further, but at a high level was just interested in getting this on an agenda because we would recommend that this be on the November 2020 ballot. We do polling on these items between now and then, and we continue to work with stakeholders to get this refined and ready to go early next year.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, could we staff has a clarifying question?
Yeah.
The reference to a simple majority because it's special, we're confused. Why is it simple majority and not a 2/3 measure because it's a special tax?
I think we determined that the sales tax was a simple majority tax.
But if you designate the use, doesn't it become special?
Designating the use for special
you know what? You're right. I'm sorry about that. It's a 2/3 tax. You're right. I forgot that once we put all the pieces into it, that's what changed it. You're right. But I feel confident that with polling that this is something that voters would support.
Member Martinez.
I just want to thank Councilmember Bowders for creating a plan to fill service gaps that doesn't endanger current services and is mindful of the city's forecasted revenues and expenditures. And I do support moving forward with hiring a consultant and seeing if we can make this happen.
Thank you both for engaging on this work, as well as all the other budget responsibilities. This is really finely detailed work, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate your note about the sales tax. You know, my first look at sales tax is always like, ugh. But I do understand that it's targeted to divert the cost of our policies away from Emeryville residents to visitors of Emeryville that do, the stores require PD service, and the fact that our daytime population triples requires fire service. So I do think it's very thoughtful in that way. I'm inclined to think very carefully about something like this, and I like it at first blush. I would also like to add into the discussion something that's not, I wouldn't currently support unless things change, but I'm working on changing things, a discussion of a TNC Transportation Network Company tax in November 2020, if eligible state laws are altered to make that legally possible in the intervening time.
Okay, can you talk about that a little more, just so I understand?
Sorry, let me give some context to this. This is something I've been working on. Right now, Uber and Lyft are my most two well-known transportation network companies. TNCs for short is, I guess, the new term for policy on them. And under state law, because of the PUC, cities actually can't tax them. But if you saw the news yesterday, you noticed that San Francisco put a ballot initiative up this year to tax them. And the reason they were able to do that is because Supervisor Peskin, through some complicated political maneuvers, was able to get a carve-out in the state law specifically for San Francisco. And it's going to be a special tax, and the funds will go towards transportation. So that will offset the direct impact of transportation network companies on the roads and the streets of San Francisco, which, if you've been reading the reports, can account for up to 40% of traffic during congested times. I want me some of that.
Yeah.
I support the mayor.
Yeah, I support.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my other colleagues. Member Donahue?
That seems good.
Oh, what about the other one too?
Yeah, they both seem thoughtful and, yeah, it seems wise.
I like that John does like this really detailed thing, and I'm like, I want me some of that, and you're like, they're both thoughtful. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate the vote of confidence. Vice Mayor?
I support both.
Are these the only ones we want to consider? Anything else we want to throw on the table?
But I would just say, Madam Mayor, that if, I would ask staff, but I would just say that if everybody is supportive of these at a high level, I don't know, Madam City Manager, when it would be appropriate to convene staff to begin doing a study of this, or if we want to have a study session of these two items beyond this. I know that Mayor Medina and I, in the transportation capacity, are having a conversation with San Francisco about how they did the TNC work and kind of just understanding better the opportunities with that. I know that's mid-June, so maybe we want to collectively, is it hard on staff to move on this in July to start that moving if we're looking at a November timeframe?
So it would be helpful to know what more you need from staff, particularly on the sales tax measure, because that seems pretty straightforward. We can confirm the math, but that would be, so what we'd need to start doing is putting out an RFP. Yes, it's too soon to have a consultant on board to talk about the polling questions next month. We could probably get that in place by September if we do the RFP next month. I guess I would recommend against spending your polling money in the fall of 19 when you don't have the election for a year. You probably want to do your polling into 2020, but we could certainly get some guidance from the consultant about how to put the questions together and that kind of thing. So we could work on the RFP now.
Also,
but I would caution against polling a year in advance.
I wouldn't poll.
Also, we get the benefits of seeing how San Francisco's measure fares.
Where's this up this year?
Yep, they're doing it in November. They're pushing hard.
Yeah, and
So,
then we just get a consultant.
Martinez.
This may go without saying, but I want to make sure that in our RFP we indicate that we're going back to some baseline questions that we've asked in some previous polling in case we don't end up with the same vendor who did our last polling. I want to make sure that we touch on those same quality of life questions and take this as an opportunity to see where residents of Emeryville where they're landing with their quality of life and how they're feeling about the city and city services and policy.
Thank you, Councilmember. Just so you know, my philosophy around these things is that I feel strongly that staff should be working closely with whatever consultant you choose so that the council has the opportunity to weigh in on how those questions are framed around community services in general so that you can continue to move that baseline forward and we don't just hand it over and get whatever comes off the shelf. So.
Thank you. I just don't want to ask a whole new set of questions without regard for those past data points.
Thank you. That's a great note. Okay. So is that adequate direction? We're good?
That's fine for me unless anybody feels like I think we're clear.
Great. Thank you. Department head reports. Wake up.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, as you may recall, at your last meeting, I gave you my regular report on the Planning Commission's actions at their April 25th meeting. And one of those actions that I reported on was their reconsideration of the Marketplace Redevelopment Project Parcel B, which, as you may recall, you remanded back to the Commission. That came up to you on appeal. You remanded it back to the Commission for reconsideration. So they held that reconsideration hearing on April 25th. However, some last-minute information was submitted just before the meeting, so the Commission did not feel that they were able to deliberate and vote on it at that time, so they continued the April 25th meeting to May 14th for that one item. So on May 14th, they held the continuation of the April 25th meeting. They reopened the public hearing, and then I should note they closed the public hearing initially on April 25th, and then on May 14th, they reopened the public hearing briefly and then reclosed it, and then they deliberated and voted on the project. They voted unanimously to approve the project. All 7 commissioners were present. They voted 7-0 to approve the project. And of course, that decision is appealable to the City Council. The appeal period, as always, is 15 days. So the deadline for appeals is May 29th. As of now, we have not received an appeal. Of course, this is also may be appealed by the City Council to yourselves. So if you wish to appeal this item to yourselves, this would be your opportunity to do that.
Member
And
Butters?
I have nothing further to report.
I have a couple questions. Could we appeal it on May 29th if we want to, since we have a meeting?
I suppose you could.
That's true. Yes, they can act as late as May 29th.
Right, that's the appeal deadline.
I have a couple other questions. So I've watched both of those hearings, and I just want to understand the process from the staff perspective on something before I ask anything else. So on the April 25th meeting, the commission discussed at length that there was a document provided by Wareham that offered an option 1 and an option 1A alternatives for this design of Site B. The developer said that they hadn't had enough time to review it in detail, but there were some interesting ideas. The commission, in particular Commissioner Keller, expressed concern about having the ability to review all the late correspondence and things that were submitted at 4:30, I think staff noted that day. So there was the advice from the city attorney's office was to conduct the public hearing and to close the public hearing and to come back for the limited purpose of deliberation. And that's discussed for about 10 minutes in the meeting. So that's the action that they took, and they opened the public hearing. The public participants spoke. The public hearing was closed, and the chair said that they were going to continue deliberations to the next meeting. At the next meeting, and in that packet, there is a letter from a wind expert, which was one of the reasons we remanded. There was a letter from a wind expert attesting that they didn't feel that the changes to the design had a negative impact on wind, but there was not the wind study itself. When they came back on the date in May, the wind study was apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, submitted just before the meeting by the applicant for the project. It's not included in the packet. There's no wind study in the packet. It was not presented by staff, and they actually reopened the public hearing, and Wareham walked up and said, we haven't received this, and we did not believe this was a public hearing. because they were told at the prior meeting that there would only be deliberations. And the advice of the city attorney's office repeatedly in the April meeting was, you have the deliberations next meeting, you close the public hearing today. And her actual advice is, if you close the public meeting today, we would not take new information because the public hearing would be closed. So I have grave concerns with the process that staff have taken, because it's not that you can't take new information and reopen the public hearing, but if I was in Wareham's position, who was the appellant, I would feel that I was betrayed on the process, because they watched the same hearing I watched, which said that there would not be an open public hearing testimony, and that there would just be deliberations, and then it was reopened to accept the new evidence. And so I have a major problem with the process that we've taken, unless somebody wants to explain it to me.
So, Charlie, if
I would defer to the city attorney to
sure,
respond
now,
to
correct me
this.
if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that at the April meeting, what was submitted by the applicant was a study from their wind expert that addressed the CEQA mitigation measures. And so that was part of the April packet.
Can I just stop right there? Did they submit in April a wind study?
It was not a wind tunnel analysis.
That's correct. It was not a wind tunnel.
It was a qualitative analysis.
It was an analysis from an expert.
It was the same wind study expert, I believe, who worked on the original EIR back in 2008.
So let me just narrow my question then. What was the thing that was submitted between that date and the May date that required them to reopen the public hearing so it could be considered?
A wind tunnel analysis.
Yeah, so Wareham didn't get that and wasn't prepared to respond
They
to that.
did. It was it was emailed to us. It was emailed to staff by the applicant's attorney the day before the May 14th meeting, and within 2 hours of having received it, we forwarded it to Wareham.
So the chair had the discretion, the planning commission chair at the continued regular meeting in May had the discretion to reopen the public hearing in order to accept the new evidence that was presented, as well as any additional testimony. And so the chair exercised her discretion to accept that new evidence. So the assistant city attorney was correct in that the procedure at the end of the April meeting, when the public hearing was closed, at that point, no additional testimony or evidence needed to be accepted. That being said, the chair of the hearing always has the discretion to reopen the public hearing and accept new evidence, which she did, or exercise that discretion to allow for that new evidence to come in.
I guess I'm of the opinion that that's all true. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, and that's that. But I just have a real hard time. This is a matter on an appeal. It's not like it's just being heard, and it's back on remand, and so it's part of an administrative record. And I think if you listen to the number of times the city attorney's office and then members of the commission say they just want to do the public hearing, get all the evidence today, and only deliberate next meeting, the frequency with which that is said would lead any member of the public to believe that that would be what would happen. There was no discussion at the April meeting of we could potentially take more information and then reopen the hearing. That wasn't even hypothesized to the public. And so the only commenter was Jeff Sears, and there was a whole team of people from Wareham at the first meeting, and Jeff Sears was there and said, we just received this additional information and we didn't expect a public hearing because we were told it wasn't one. And I tend to sympathize actually with that process as being less than transparent. I request review.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Did Jeff say that they're prepared to take our city to court on this, or did Jeff say that Wareham was feeling really put off by this, or is this just a point of detail that they don't really care about?
Mayor, if I can answer the council member's question.
Yeah.
No, Councilmember Donahue, Wareham did not make any such indication.
This sounds like a mountain being made out of a molehill, John. Come on, they're accepting it the way it is.
Wareham does, of course, have the opportunity to appeal.
It's true. We can all wait and see if Wareham wants to appeal. I just think my recommendation then would just be to staff that, like, the appearance of it just didn't really sit well with me because it looked like we told the public repeatedly that this was a closed public hearing. We'll just come back for deliberation. And I think, like, the goal is transparency. Like, we have to at least tell people you will have the discretion to reopen it, and this could be reopened with additional information. Because I think it also then, if Wareham wanted to submit anything else, they in theory could have done so. But the comments at the May meeting from one of the commissioners was, I want to disregard anything not noticed in the letter from the city council. The city council's directive was the notice of appeal was the limited scope of the review, which we agree with. But then it begs the question, if you're going to continue to accept additional ancillary evidence after there was a, which I understand we have this discretionary piece, I just don't think we made it a transparent process. So I have concerns with that. I understand it may be a legal process. I just don't think it looks good.
Member Pats, Vice Mayor Pats.
So, Scott, I don't disagree with you, but I do want to second what Councilmember Bowders is saying. I think it's not a huge cost to us to simply do the review, so I would support that.
Do we need to make a motion, or are we just
Yes,
giving direction?
I would ask for a motion and a vote, please.
I'll make a motion to call the item for review.
And I'll second it.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Donohue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Okay, anything else on your report?
No, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. No other department head reports. Okay, future agenda item requests from council members. All right, seeing none. Oh yeah,
I'd like to ask if we could adjourn in memory.
that's right.
Thank you. So I just want to ask, we're here late, but just for a moment of silence in memory of Jean Suchik, who was a resident of Emeryville. She died this morning at 104 years old, and her son is also a citizen of Emeryville and an active member of our community in a number of different ways. And so if we could just adjourn in her memory, she lived a long and happy life.
All right, this meeting is adjourned at 9:47.